October 8th, 1985, marked the beginning of a string of brutal robberies that rocked South Florida. Two masked men used military weapons in a violent spree that threatened innocents. But no one knew who they were or where they would strike next. Before the FBI could stop them, lives would be lost, and law enforcement would be changed forever.
In Miami, a gang of robbers targeted banks and armored cars. They carried assault weapons and weren't afraid to use them. They struck during the day and sometimes twice a day. For a while, they seemed unstoppable. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. We knew that to stop these criminals would require stealth, ingenuity, and perhaps a little luck. No one expected to become one of the bloodiest chapters in FBI history.
Miami, Florida, 1985. To FBI agents, it seemed a city under siege. Each week, there were 3 to 5 bank robberies. Kidnappings, major drug deals, and shootings were everyday occurrences. But just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, a new breed of outlaws hit the streets and turned the Miami crime wave into a war. On October 8th, an armored car courier made a scheduled pickup at a steak and ale restaurant. The driver waited for his partner to return, unaware that 2 heavily armed men were also waiting nearby. As the guard approached the rear of the truck, the gunman advanced with military-style precision.
Hold it! Come out! I can't. Open the door. Tell him to open the door.
The driver refused to open his door. He drove away, following company policy. The subjects retreated to a getaway car and attempted to camouflage their escape with a military-issue smoke grenade. The Metro-Dade County Police and the FBI responded to the scene. Robberies of armored cars and banks fall under FBI jurisdiction. The supervisor of the Miami FBI's Violent Crimes Unit was Special Agent Gordon McNeil.
There were basically no clues as far as who these individuals were. We had absolutely no idea, no way to go. No one had seen them without the black hoods over their faces. They wore gloves on both hands.
One piece of information witnesses did provide was the license number of the getaway car. Agents tracked the number and learned the car had been stolen a month before. But the lead was a dead end. The robbers had escaped with only $2,800. But their use of military weapons and commando tactics convinced Agent McNeil they would probably strike somewhere in Miami again. But where and when? The answer came just 8 days later. At a busy supermarket on South Dixie Highway, another armored car arrived to make a scheduled pickup. A courier returned to the truck with several money bags filled with cash and receipts. He never saw the car that came around the corner. escaped empty-handed. Metro-Dade police and the FBI quickly responded to the alarm.
6 Adam 31 1097.
These men were clearly not afraid to use deadly force. The courier would later die from his injury. While he was taken to the hospital, agents interviewed his partner. As he described the gunmen, it quickly became obvious they were probably the same men responsible for the previous robbery at the Steak and Ale restaurant.
There was no money taken in that particular robbery, but there were a number of shots fired. So the ante was still going up here as far as I was concerned because of the continued use of violence by these two individuals.
Ballistics evidence would further confirm the connection between the two robberies. Investigators found double-aught buckshot from a 12-gauge shotgun, 45 caliber bullet casings, and 223 shell casings. The 223s seemed most significant.
And the identification division of the firearms unit of the FBI laboratory compared those two shell casings and said they were fired from the same weapon. So we definitely had a link now between the Winn-Dixie attempt and the Steak and Ale robbery.
Two violent robberies were linked to the same masked gunman. But there were no leads to their identities. Because they had not scored any cash at the Winn-Dixie robbery and so little at the Steak and Ale, investigators were certain they would soon strike again. 2 weeks later, on Friday, November 8th, a third robbery occurred. This time a bank job at the Florida National Bank. As a teller and a guard walked from the main building to the drive-thru, two masked gunmen emerged from a car. At gunpoint, they ordered the teller to open the door to the drive-thru.
Get it open now.
She tried to comply, but there was a problem with the key.
Hurry up!
Stalled in broad daylight at a busy intersection, the gunman aborted the robbery and fled with only the $10,000 the guard had been carrying. Within minutes, local authorities and the FBI Violent Crimes Unit responded to the scene of the crime. Just a few blocks away from the two previous robberies.
This pattern was starting to develop that all these crimes were happening in this same general area along U.S. Highway number 1.
FBI interviews with the bank employees confirmed that the robbers were the same pair who'd hit the armored cars. Maybe they figured a drive-through bank would be less heavily fortified than armored cars, easier sources of cash.
There was no higher priority in this case. We had to find these guys, and we had to get them off the street before they killed more innocent people.
But just an hour and a half later, they hit the Professional Savings Bank only 18 blocks away.
Get your hands up! Get your hands up! Get on over there! Get out of the ground! On the ground now! Get out! Get out! Get out! You, come here! Come on over here! Come on! You, come over here!
The robbers
Come on
quickly
now.
took control of the lobby. At gunpoint,
Put your hands
both
down.
customers and employees quickly followed their orders. With their masks and high-powered weapons, no one doubted they meant business.
Face down! Face down!
This time, they scored big.
Stand!
They raced off with over $41,000, delivered earlier that day by Wells Fargo. They escaped in yet another getaway car, a Chevie Monte Carlo. Witnesses had little to tell agents. The robbers had entered quickly and forced everyone down on the floor where they couldn't see what was going on.
Say to you exactly.
Get your hands up.
But since the men had actually been inside the bank this time, perhaps the security cameras had captured them on tape. Agents were soon disappointed to learn that the cameras had somehow malfunctioned and nothing had been recorded. It was the fourth robbery in 6 weeks. The heavily armed robbers were looting banks and armored cars in broad daylight.
The witnesses in these cases indicated that they felt that these people looked like true professionals. The way they walked, the way they talked, the way they carried the weapons. And I truly believed up until when we finally found out who they were, that we could very easily have been dealing with police officers here or very recent ex-military.
With such violent criminals on the loose, agents honed their own skills on the firing range. They worked the case relentlessly, exchanging whatever slim leads they had. But nothing panned out. 2 months went by without another robbery, and still there were no leads. On Friday, January 10th, 1986, William Roberts prepared to make a transaction at the Barnett Bank, just as an armored truck was unloading outside. He looked up from his checkbook and watched as 2 masked robbers shot the guard in the back. As the guard lay on the ground, one of the gunmen shot him twice more. This was the robbers' 5th heist in just 3 months, and another big hit. They fled with $54,000. William Roberts trailed the men for blocks. Though he maintained a safe distance, Roberts worried the thieves knew he was following them. Still, he stayed on their tail and noted their license tag and car model. He tracked them to a parking lot where they pulled in next to a white pickup truck. Roberts parked across the street and continued to watch them. He noted the make and model of the pickup truck, but could not see the tag number. After driving off, Roberts would flag down an officer and tell him the story. The FBI responded to the scene and interviewed bank employees. They found several .223 rounds, later determined to be fired from the same weapon used in the first 2 robberies. Nearby, FBI agents examined the getaway car the robbers had left behind. But William Roberts was the star witness. Thanks to Roberts, the FBI had the first big break in a 3-month string of violent robberies. A check on the license tag of the getaway car revealed the car was registered to a man named Aureliano Brielle. Agents prepared to pay him a visit. Since the car had never been reported stolen, they suspected Brielle was involved in the crimes. They dressed for safety. In Miami, the FBI had been tracking 2 masked gunmen who had been robbing armored cars and banks, already killing 1 guard. Now agents had located the registered owner of one of the getaway cars. On January 14th, Special Agent Morellis and a partner arrived at the home of Aureliano Brielle, the registered owner of the car. A woman opened the door. Special Agent Morellis now works undercover and wears a hood to protect his identity.
She asked me if I was there about her son, and I said yes, I was, as a matter of fact. She said, well, my son Emilio has been missing.
Mrs. Brielle's husband came to the door and they invited the agents to come into the house. Mr. Brielle explained that his son Emilio had disappeared 3 months ago with the family car, which he borrowed to go target shooting in the Everglades. The Brielles had filed a missing persons report, but heard nothing. They had hoped the agents brought news of their son. But both the Brielles and the agents would be disappointed. The FBI knew nothing of the young man's whereabouts. And as the interview progressed, Agent Morellis grew certain the Brielles knew nothing of the robberies.
The conclusion at the end of the day was that the Brielle family was not involved. They were victims. Their car had been stolen and their son was missing.
The Metro-Dade Police Department processed the Brielle's car with FBI agents observing. But evidence technicians found no fingerprints or anything else to advance the case. The next 2 months were quiet again, though the robbers remained on the loose. Agents worked other cases as they continued to mine every possible resource for clues. Then on March 14th, Special Agent Ben Grogan told a skeptical Agent Morellis about a newspaper article he believed was related to the case.
I guarantee it. That car right
The
there.
article reported the attempted murder of a man named Jose Collazo 2 days earlier. Two men had shot Collazo multiple times. Then they had stolen his gun and his car, a black 1982 Chevy Monte Carlo.
Guarantee you I'm right.
Grogan swore that the vehicle would be the bank robber's next getaway car. While it seemed to some agents nothing more than a hunch, they respected Grogan.
Car and disappeared. Shot him 4 times with the arm, through the face.
At 53, he was a career agent with 25 years on the job, including time as a SWAT team leader.
Is he still alive? Yeah, he got up, walked 1.5 miles to a convenience store, made a phone
His colleagues called him the doctor because he could do jobs no one else could do.
What do you think? Check on these plates.
So they took a chance on his hunch.
Get on it. Good job.
Mr. Collazo, tell me what happened. These 2 guys.
Grogan and another agent visited Collazo in the hospital.
They were 2 white males. 2 white males.
Collazo was in rough shape, with wounds to the side of his head, his arm, and his back. But he managed to tell the story of his nightmarish afternoon in the Everglades.
Oh my God, there's a car and...
Collazo had gone to a recreational trail near a lake, where gun owners often practice target shooting. He was firing his .22 when 2 men drove up beside him.
How you doing?
The driver pulled a gun on Collazo,
Hold up, shut up.
who somehow had the presence of mind to identify it as a steel blue Magnum revolver.
Shut up.
He pegged the other man's rifle as a Ruger Mini 14.
Shut up, shut up. Give him the gun. Give him the gun.
When the assailants demanded Collazo's guns, car, and wallet, he complied.
Now back on up. Back up. Give you everything. Back up. Shut up.
But they shot him several times anyway,
Back
at
up.
close range. Then they left, taking Collazo's Monte Carlo and their own F-150 pickup truck. As they drove off, they believed Collazo was dead. He was just waiting until the shooters were gone. Then he would rally what little strength he had to survive.
Collazo had to make a decision as to whether he would try to live or just lay down and die. And Collazo said he chose to try to live, so he picked himself up out of that lake and walked almost a mile after being shot 3 times to seek help.
Finding Collazo was the best break in the case so far. He provided the single clue no witness until now could offer: a description of the suspects' faces. They had not worn masks when they assaulted him. Using Collazo's description, a Dade County police artist drew composite sketches of his assailants. The drawings would be made into posters with information about the suspects and their crimes, plus the warning that both men were heavily armed and extremely dangerous. Retired Special Agent John Hanlon, a 22-year FBI veteran then assigned to the Violent Crimes Unit, remembers what Collazo said.
Collazo was able to give a description of the guys. He told us about the white pickup truck. He was shot in the same general area as we thought Emilio Brielle had disappeared.
In the coming days, agents stepped up their efforts. They conducted a grid search of the streets crossing South Dixie Highway in the vicinity of the bank robberies.
I got the agents together. After I told them what I had on my mind, they looked at me like I was crazy. But I said, I want you to get down between 88th Street on South Dixie Highway and 185th Street and come up with any license numbers on white Ford F-150 pickup trucks. Something just told me in my gut that perhaps, who knows, we're trying to make our own luck. What is it, 1 million to 1, 10 million to 1? I don't know. But they came back with the license numbers of 10 white Ford F-150 pickup trucks.
Computerized checks of the license numbers would reveal the owners' names. Agents would then request driver's license photos from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Perhaps if Collazo saw the photos, he could identify the truck's owner. But in 1986, technology was slow, and before the photos came back from the DMV, the robbers struck again. On Wednesday, March 19th, just 1 week after Collazo's assault.
Get your hands up! Get your hands up! Turn around! Get out! Get out! Get down! On the floor! Both of us! Come on out! Get out!
The thieves hit another bank on South Dixie Highway.
Back up! Get out! Come on! Get out! Give me the bag!
It was their 6th hit in 5 months.
Give me the money! Get out! Put your face down! Be quiet!
One kept the terrified customers at bay. The other looted money from a teller.
Stand, everybody! Don't move! Don't look up!
The men escaped with over $8,000 in cash. As customers and employees recovered from the assault, an off-duty customs official who had seen the robbers flee called police. He'd noted the make of the getaway car, a black Chevie Monte Carlo, and the tag number, NTJ-891. Just as Agent Grogan had predicted, it was Jose Collazo's car.
They didn't even change the tag. And we're not really sure whether they were, well, we're pretty sure they weren't that stupid, but we speculate that in their minds, you know, they were these hard men. And we think that they were probably just saying, hey, in your face, police, you know, come and get us if you can.
Investigators learned little of value from witnesses. At this bank, the security cameras had filmed the entire robbery. But the videotape was of little use. The camera's lenses had captured little more than unidentifiable masked bandits. There was little doubt these robbers planned each hit carefully.
It appeared to me that they were doing surveillance of the banks prior to some of the robberies, because on most occasions they robbed the bank within 10 minutes of delivery of a cash shipment by an armored car company. So they were waiting until the cash was inside from the armored car company and then hit the bank.
On April 10th, Gordon McNeil and Ben Grogan discussed the case at firearms practice, sifting for any clues they may have overlooked. It had been about 3 weeks since the last robbery. There were no clues to the thieves' identities, but McNeil detected a pattern.
You're always looking in law enforcement for patterns of crime, things that seem to happen on a consistent basis. And the only thing that we had gone in these cases was this significant pattern that developed, always on Friday between 9 and 12, hitting the same banks multiple times, always in the same 40 square block area, always along South Dixie Highway.
Agents planned a surveillance for the next day. They would fan out to patrol the area where the robbers had struck so often.
Hey guys, you got a minute?
Yeah.
Unit Supervisor Gordon McNeil personally led the operation.
Everybody will leave from that location.
We just couldn't wait for them to rob another bank. We had to get out there and we had to make our own luck, and maybe we could find them.
Start watching for the vehicle. If you come across
Agent Hanlon remembers what happened next.
put it into play and hopefully it'll work out.
Eddie Morales walked over and said, "Hey, let's go down there." And I thought, well, what the heck, you know? So as a whim, I mean, there was no pressure to go or anything of that kind. I mean, I certainly had enough to do, and I liked Eddie, and I figured, well, we'll go on down there, we'll ride down, and rather cavalierly, and spend some good times with Ed, and we'll take it from there.
Many believed it was a long shot, but 14 Miami FBI agents met in a parking lot at 8:45 a.m. on Friday, April 11th, 1986. They would surveil a 53-block grid along South Dixie Highway, where 2 commando-style gunmen had pulled off 3 bank robberies and 3 armored car heists in 6 months. The suspects were described as white men, of medium build, one with a handlebar mustache, both about 30 years old. They were heavily armed and extremely dangerous. They might be driving a black Monte Carlo, license number NTJ 891. After a robbery spree that had lasted 6 months, Miami FBI agents went on the offensive in search of 2 killers, possibly driving a black Monte Carlo. They met to patrol an area where the 2 armed robbers had used military tactics to hit armored cars and banks. All would be stationed along the major thoroughfare of South Dixie Highway. Agents Ben Grogan and Jerry Dove were on their way to stake out the Barnett Bank when the impossible happened. A car that fit the description of the suspect's vehicle pulled directly in front of them. In disbelief, Agent Grogan advised all units of what he saw.
Attention all units, we're behind.
Gordon McNeil remembers the call.
Grogan was not an emotional person. Nothing could get Grogan excited. And I still remember his voice. He said, "We are behind a black Chevrolet Monte Carlo, Dade, Florida tag, NTJ 891. He said, "That's the tag, isn't it, Gordo?" I mean, he was just incredulous.
Agents Morales and Hanlon were stationed at the Professional Savings Bank when they heard Grogan's call. They began to search for their colleagues. Hanlon was driving, with Morellis working the radio. Hanlon tried to get a gauge on Grogan and Dove's location.
And I remember saying to Eddie, call Ben, tell him to start calling the cross streets so we'll know how close we're getting. Before Eddie had a chance to go on the air, Ben starts calling off the cross streets, and we're hitting those cross streets, one after another, so we were real close to them.
After proceeding south for several blocks, Hanlon and Morellis closed in behind them. The robbers soon suspected they were being followed. Whether they knew their pursuers were FBI or not, the suspects wanted to lose them. They took a right turn on 117th Street into a residential neighborhood, quiet at this time of day.
Still following? Still behind us. They're coming.
They turned right again, trying to lose the tail. But the agents hung on, playing for time, as Agent Morellis recalls.
We were just trying to wait for as many FBI units to get to the location as possible. And we were also basically responding to what the subjects did. They weren't in any hurry. When they turned onto 120th Street, they actually slowed down.
The caravan continued on, with the agents always concerned about endangering innocent bystanders. Then the suspects made a left onto 82nd. It appeared they were heading back to the busy highway, where civilians would be at risk should a confrontation turn violent. When Grogan saw the silhouette of a long-barreled rifle through the rear window of the subject's vehicle, he knew it was time to act.
70 car stop, let's do it.
It was clear the suspects were preparing to do battle. Grogan put the light on his car and ordered a felony stop. Grogan pulled alongside the suspect's car and ordered them to stop. The suspects ignored the order, and Grogan pulled ahead of them, blocking their escape. Hanlon and Morellis moved up, boxing them in. The sight made an indelible impression on veteran agent John Hanlon.
And I'll never forget the man's face. I could pick him out today. He looked like your basic Western bad man. He looked very, very determined.
It seemed the suspects were as desperate to prevail as the agents who pursued them. Two heavily armed fugitives had ignored FBI orders to stop their vehicle. Special agents now tried to force them to comply. The last to catch up to the group was Agent Richard Manauzi. As he pulled behind the suspect's car, he saw one of the gunmen take aim at Morellis and Hanlon. Manauzi rammed the fugitive's car from behind.
They swung into a U-turn, and then Manauzi was able to hit him again and knocked him over into this parking area up against some cars over there.
passenger opened fire with a Mini-14 assault rifle. Outgunned, Agent Manalzi crawled to cover. Agent McNeil arrived seconds later, firing at point-blank range. They were surrounded by FBI. Their vehicle could not move, but they had superior firepower. And they refused to surrender. The driver fired a shotgun blast at Grogan. McNeil hit the driver in the neck. But the semi-automatic kept pumping out the rounds until one finally caught McNeil in the hand. Morellis and Hanlon advanced to cover him. Hanlon's .38 held 5 rounds. The Mini-14 had 30 rounds in each clip. And one of them shot down Agent Morellis.
It was all one continuous recollection. It was like 1 second I'm looking at Gordon McNeil's back, trying to maneuver to his left, and the next second is blue sky. And I looked at my left arm, and my left arm was completely shattered. It was like roadkill.
His partner was down, but the shooter kept on firing. But when he tried to escape out the window, Jerry Dove hit him in the chest with his 9mm. But to Dove's horror, the man shot McNeil in the neck.
I couldn't move my upper body, I couldn't move my arm, and I couldn't move my legs. So I assumed that I was totally paralyzed at that particular point. I couldn't move.
2 more FBI agents arrived and joined the gunfight. By now, the shooter had been hit 4 times, but he continued to advance and fire.
He just made up his mind that he was gone down, he was gone out, and he was going to take as many of us with him as he possibly could.
The agents knew they were outgunned, firing 6 shooters against the suspect's 30-round semi-automatic assault weapons. Dove and Grogan were forced to retreat behind their car to reload. Hanlon too reloaded. But the shooter kept on coming.
One went right through my knuckles on my right hand and through the knuckle in my thumb. A bunch of lead and whatever went into the back of my arm, and I remember my gun going flying. I said, "Ben, I've been hit."
As Hanlon tried to retreat under the bumper, the gunman shot him in the groin.
The blood geysered from my groin to my knee. I mean, the blood just came out like a balloon breaking.
Grogan was hit. And then Dove. Before they could reload their weapons.
I remember Ben saying, "Oh my God," and he fell at my feet. And at some point along in here, I heard the breath go out of him. He went, "Ugh."
The subject made his way to Agent Dove's car. With his left arm nearly blown off, Agent Morellis managed to pull himself out. The shooter was trying to flee, and Morellis had to stop him. Mortally wounded, the second suspect somehow dragged himself out of his car and joined his partner. If the car started, Morellis knew they could only go in reverse and back over the fallen agents.
Eventually, I just got angry because I knew internally that I was dying, and my one last thought was, hey, if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna take these guys with me. I'm gonna make sure that they're dead.
With his shotgun empty, Morellis changed to his revolver and staggered forward, firing at the subjects. Morellis' shots lodged in the men's spines, killing them both. It was a violent end to the lives of two violent men. Just a few minutes after it began, the bloodiest firefight in FBI history ended in tragedy. 2 agents were dead and 5 wounded. 2 suspects still unidentified had also been killed.
Over here! Hurry up! Hey, let's have a killing me, man!
Agent Jerry Dove lay dead. At the age of 30, he'd earned a law degree and fulfilled his boyhood dream of joining the FBI. He wanted to make a difference and had given his life trying. His partner, Ben Grogan, had also perished in the firefight. He had been just 1 year away from retirement when his wife could finally have stopped worrying about her husband's dangerous career. Crime scene technicians arrived at the site. Metro-Dade County Homicide Bureau Sergeant David Rivers was also there. Rivers had the Herculean task of reconstructing 5 minutes of living terror. That would take weeks.
Well, we have to find out what happened. And you do that in various ways. You obviously speak to the agents that were involved, and they can tell you what each one of them did individually. And then part of that is to take those different statements as to what they did individually and match it up with the physical evidence. The wounds on the body, the bullet holes in the cars, where the guns are located, where the cars are located, and to reconstruct it to make sure everything's exactly interpreted properly.
Technicians recovered 143 bullets fired from the fugitives' weapons. Questions that had plagued agents for so long were finally being answered. The Ruger Mini 14 rifle used to kill agents Grogan and Dove would match the .223 bullets found at some of the armored car and bank robbery scenes. In fact, the FBI crime lab could now forensically link the killers with several of the earlier heists. And from fingerprints, the agents soon identified the subjects as 32-year-old Michael Lee Platt and 34-year-old William Russell Maddox. But one question remained. What kind of men had wreaked this destruction, and why? Agents could not have been more surprised by what they learned from the killer's friends and neighbors. Instead of outlaws living on the edge, prepared for the ultimate confrontation, Platt and Maddox were known as quiet, family men. Photos showed their families relaxing together. Platt had a wife and 3 children. Maddox was a single dad. They were partners in a landscaping business. But further investigation gave up the lie of their double life. Inside a shed, agents found guns and ammunition, including the .22 Maddox and Platt had stolen from Jose Collazo when they tried to kill him in the Everglades. Agents would also uncover evidence of a bizarre murder pact in which the men may have killed each other's previous wives. No one had been charged in the two cases, but now they would be reopened. Within days, agents would confirm that Maddox and Platt had killed 25-year-old Emilio Brielle in the Everglades. A hiker found Brielle's skeletal remains in the Everglades, not far from where Collazo had been assaulted. Then another tragic footnote surfaced.
Thanks a lot. Hey, how did that interview go for you earlier today?
Special Agent Steve Warner received a package from the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles. In it was a copy of William Russell Maddox's driver's license. He was the owner of one of the white Ford F-150 pickup trucks agents had located a few weeks before. But there had been a delay in sending the licenses.
If they had arrived April 11th or prior to that, Collazo would have been able to positively identify Maddox, and we probably would have been able to arrest Maddox and also Platt, and 2 FBI agents wouldn't have been killed. But that's not the way the luck worked out in this particular case.
The FBI investigation revealed that both of the killers had served in the military. Platt had been a Ranger, a member of the Army's elite First Strike Force, which explained the pair's commando tactics, fundamentally different than training received by law enforcement.
We don't have an acceptable body count in civilian law enforcement. We're taught one way, and that's defensive type shooting. You take cover, you do not take casualties. And then you look at the way Platt reacted that day. He reacted in a military fashion. He had the heavier weapon. He had the Mini 14 with a 30-round capacity. His back was basically against the wall. He had no place to go, so he advanced forward on our position, laying down suppression fire, and ambushed Grogan and Dove, who were behind the car.
As agents finally put the pieces together, a frightening portrait emerged of two formidable adversaries.
At the end of the shooting, Platt had 11 hits, Maddox had 6 hits. Platt was literally shot to pieces, and he kept fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting until he ran out of breath. He fought to the last.
They were going to die, it's just they weren't dying fast enough. And they weren't prepared to lay down and die. You know? They weren't about to give up.
Out of this tragedy came some positive changes that have improved the safety of all in the law enforcement community. Agents and officers now carry more powerful weapons, and their training better prepares them for violent confrontations like the one on April 11th, 1986. As hundreds mourn the deaths of 2 dedicated and selfless FBI agents, those in law enforcement have looked for meaning in the tragic events of that April morning. Over the years, Gordon McNeil has found some resolution.
The story's not Platt and Maddox. It's not important who they were. It's important to recall the courage that was shown by the agents that day and the FBI. They did their job.
An attempted cop killing. A drug house shootout. And a violent bank robbery. A gang of dangerous criminals threatens an entire community. The FBI and an undercover ex-cop put their lives on the line to track down the gunman.
In the late 1990s, one criminal terrorized an entire community. Witnesses refused to speak out. They knew the consequences could be deadly. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the violence escalated, the FBI worked with local law enforcement to launch a complex sting operation. Their mission? To lure this vicious fugitive out of hiding with the promise of a big score, and to get him off the streets for good.
Camden, New Jersey, located just across the river from Philadelphia. It is one of the poorest, most crime-ridden cities in America. On February 12, 1997, Officer Stephen Leone patrols the street. It's 4:20 a.m. Officer Leone stops to catch up on some paperwork.
I heard a massive amount of gunfire coming from the east side of Camden. Gunfire in excess of 50 rounds. Well, it's not unusual to hear gunfire in Camden, so it's a commonplace thing. And I try to locate a general area before I put out a call for an assistance, so we didn't have cops running all over the place.
Officer Leone drives toward the area of the gunshots. The streets are deserted until a suspicious car appears. Officer Leone pulls in behind the car.
Then it appeared that the vehicle saw that I was a patrol vehicle, and he made a left-hand turn. I went down on the seat, and then I came up and I could taste my own blood.
Officer Leone has been hit in the face. Somehow he pulls himself out of his vehicle.
I bailed out of the car to take up a tactical position in the rear of my vehicle in case my assailants attempted to come back or they were still in the area. I knew I was hit. I knew I was hit with a bullet in the face and the head, and I didn't know how serious I was hurt. I radioed an officer down, officer shot, shots fired.
Officer down, officer needs assistance immediately. My location, shots fired.
Within minutes, Camden police and rescue units respond to the scene.
Did you get a description of the vehicle?
Despite his wounds, Officer Leone gives them a description of the shooter's car. Paramedics try to stabilize him for transport to a nearby hospital. The officer has bullet fragments embedded in his face.
I took 3 in the scalp, 1 in my left eye socket, 1 in my right eye socket, and a little piece of my nose. I was lucky I didn't lose my vision.
Paramedics rush Officer Leone to the hospital, while investigators scour the scene looking for evidence. Camden County Prosecutor Lee Solomon.
The idea that somebody would be so brazen, so arrogant, to fire a weapon at a police officer is something that we mobilize against very quickly.
Investigators search the area looking for the shooter's vehicle. Police are called to a house not far from the crime scene. A neighbor heard gunshots earlier that evening.
We got a call for shots being fired out here.
They notice the front door is riddled with bullet holes.
I hear something banging in the door.
According to the man, earlier that night, someone tried to break down his front door.
Coming in to get me.
The resident grabbed his gun. The intruders heard him moving in the house and opened fire. The resident returned fire, forcing the attackers to retreat. Police believe the attack was what they refer to as a ninja-style robbery, where masked gunmen invade a house to steal drugs or money. Over 50 rounds are fired into the house.
One of the bullets passed through a wall, a refrigerator, the rear wall of the residence, and the projectile was never found. Another went through a ceiling, floor ceiling, through the roof. Again, the projectile was never found. These were high-powered weapons, and so there was cause for concern.
Later that morning, a few blocks away, police discover an abandoned vehicle. The car matches Officer Leone's description of the vehicle used in the shootout.
There was broken glass, there was expended shells from the AR-15 and a .45 caliber pistol found in the car. And there was blood in the vehicle.
It was apparent to investigators that one of the perpetrators had been wounded. The officer runs the license plate. The car belongs to a woman who lives in the neighborhood. The canine unit picks up the scent from the car and tracks it to the same address listed on the vehicle registration.
And it was found 2 or 3 blocks from where I was, the location of my shooting was.
A SWAT team prepares to storm the house in case the shooters are still inside.
And there was an elementary school which they closed for the day because they thought there'd be a gun battle with these individuals that were heavily armed.
Inside the house, there is no sign of the gunman. Instead, the SWAT team finds a woman who police discover is the owner of the vehicle.
Who do you think you are? You're not allowed to be in my house. You have
Shut up!
They learn that she is the girlfriend of Charlie Rodriguez, one of Camden's most violent criminals. Between 1984 and 1989, Charlie had been arrested for weapons and drug charges as well as making terrorist threats.
Crazy Charlie was known as a guy who would do anything. No violent act was beyond him. Crazy Charlie was the kind of guy that would shoot at a cop, would shoot at an old person, would shoot at a young person, would shoot indiscriminately.
SWAT finds no sign of the gunman. Police search the premises and question the girlfriend.
What's your
What
name?
are you doing in my house?
What's your name?
I don't have any.
She tells them she was at work at the time of the shooting and that she had reported her car stolen. Investigators search the house and find drops of blood. They call for forensics to collect the blood as evidence.
Evidence tech to collect some evidence, please. Have some blood on the sink.
Okay, we're doing a camera.
Investigators canvass the area, questioning the girlfriend's neighbors. They find someone who remembers seeing a few men leaving the girlfriend's house very early that morning. After looking through a photo lineup, he identifies one of the men. According to police records, the suspect is Jose Baez, on parole for manslaughter and weapons violations. Police track Baez to an apartment in Deptford, New Jersey. The dangerous ex-con is investigators' only link to a would-be cop killer. A violent rampage in Camden, New Jersey results in the shooting of a police officer. Evidence leads investigators to Jose Baez, an ex-con they believe was involved in the shooting. Baez is quickly taken into custody.
Turn around.
Investigators notice the suspect has a wound on one of his hands.
You that all by yourself?
He recently sustained some type of bullet wound to his hand that he tried to sew up using thread himself.
Police arrest Baez for parole violations and take a sample of his blood for DNA testing. In the lab, Baez's blood is compared to evidence gathered in the Leone shooting.
And they were able to match the blood from him to the blood found on the scene, in the vehicle and at the house.
Investigators now have proof that Baez was in the car at the time Officer Leone was shot. But they don't have evidence to suggest that he actually pulled the trigger. At first, Baez refuses to talk to authorities. But after 2 weeks in custody, he asks to meet with the investigators.
Jose, you already been read your rights, so I have to go over that with you. I'm an investigator with Camden County, and I'm trying to figure out information about the shooting.
Baez finally agrees to talk, but only if police take steps to protect his family. He says that Charlie Rodriguez, Crazy Charlie, was involved in the Ninja robbery as well as the Leone shooting.
I believe that Baez ultimately cooperated because Charlie had threatened his family. And out of fear that something might happen, he had cooperated.
The Camden County Prosecutor's Office obtains a warrant on Charlie Rodriguez for the attempted murder of a police officer. They also offer a $1,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. The state of New Jersey places Charlie Rodriguez on the top 10 list of wanted fugitives.
There was a manhunt every day. Every Camden cop and every cop in Camden County was looking for Charlie Rodriguez.
Although Charlie is well known throughout Camden, residents are too afraid to talk to police.
Fear is a powerful weapon for somebody like Charlie Rodriguez.
In the month following Officer Leone's shooting, police question their informants. All they learn is that Charlie is hiding somewhere across the river in Philadelphia. Since Charlie is believed to have fled to another state, local police turn to the FBI for help. FBI agent John Tam obtains a federal warrant and leads a multi-state hunt for Charlie Rodriguez.
I start by getting good photographs, reviewing his prior criminal records, and I also review prison records to see who their cellmates were, who visited them while they were in prison, and an attempt to identify people they might be in contact with.
FBI agents cast a wide net. But like local police, the FBI find that people are too terrified to talk.
Charlie Rodriguez's reputation was of a stone-cold killer. People were very cautious about talking about him.
Agents set up surveillance on Charlie's girlfriend, hoping she will lead them to Charlie.
Rodriguez had enough self-discipline to stay away from her and keep her away from him, so that wasn't helping us either.
Over the next few months, agents continue to question their informants and learn that Charlie is hiding in a tough Philadelphia slum known as the Badlands.
A very tough neighborhood, a lot of drug activity, difficult to police. People live there intimidated by the criminals. It's a hard place to find a fugitive because you get very little cooperation.
FBI SWAT teams raid buildings in the Badlands where Charlie is believed to be hiding.
We get the fugitive task force out over in Philadelphia, 5 in the morning, we hit the place, we'd catch somebody, they would be a criminal, but it wouldn't be Charlie Rodriguez. You know, we'd end up arresting somebody who was wanted for something else. Let's go.
At the same time, on the crime-ridden streets of Camden, the FBI is running an unrelated drug investigation. And Special Agent Jim Walsh gets an unexpected tip.
We obtained information that Charlie Rodriguez and his brother Joseph and some other individuals were planning to commit a bank robbery or a robbery of an armored car in the near future.
Joseph Rodriguez, he had previously been convicted of murder in an infamous drug shooting that occurred in the early 90s. Where 2 teenagers were killed on a drug corner in South Camden.
According to an informant, Charlie and Joey Rodriguez are targeting one bank in particular in the nearby town of Woodland, New Jersey. Agents set up surveillance teams. If the Rodriguez brothers hit the bank, local police are nearby ready to make the arrest. But weeks pass with no sign of the robbers.
Due to manpower needs, we couldn't sustain the surveillances. And after about a month and a half, we had to discontinue them.
On July 19th, 1997, a few weeks after the FBI ends surveillance, several heavily armed men hit the Woodland Bank. One teller is too frightened to move. Two of the robbers forced the teller to empty the cash drawers. The remaining robber guards the lobby and calls out how much time has passed. One robber tries to force the supervisor to open the vault. She tells him she can't. The vault is on a timer. He tells her if she doesn't open the vault, he will kill her. In New Jersey, the shooting of a Camden police officer launches an FBI manhunt for a violent ex-con named Charlie Rodriguez. 5 months later, 3 men carrying semi-automatic weapons burst into a bank in Woodland, New Jersey. The bank supervisor can't open the vault. It's on a timer. One of the robbers threatens to kill her. The robbers are out of time. They have to leave before police arrive. The bank supervisor escapes with her life. FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh investigate the robbery. The customers and the bank employees are terrified. Special Agent Jim Walsh.
All the individuals were upset. One woman had to be taken to the hospital. She was so scared she suffered a minor heart attack.
Can you describe any one of them at all?
Because the violent nature of the bank robbery. I knew immediately that it was Charlie Rodriguez and his brother.
Agents and police watch the bridges to Pennsylvania and the New Jersey Turnpike for the Rodriguez brothers. They find no sign of them. At the FBI office in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Agents Walsh and Tam study surveillance photos and footage from the bank's security cameras, looking for clues. Special Agent John Tam.
We got a good look at the weapons they were carrying, which were semi-automatic rifles, what is known as an AR-15. It's a very dangerous weapon because standard law enforcement body armor will not stop that round.
Although agents feel confident the robbers are Charlie and Joey Rodriguez, they cannot positively ID them from the surveillance.
You could not identify them in any way. They were fully clothed. They had gloves on, masks, hats.
Joey Rodriguez continues to live openly in Camden. The FBI doesn't have enough evidence to arrest him. Agents watch Joey, hoping he will lead them to Charlie.
He realized that he was the connection, if there was any, to his brother, and they stayed away from each other.
Over the next 7 months, the Camden, New Jersey area is plagued by a string of bank robberies. The Rodriguez brothers are possible suspects, but police have no hard evidence to link them to the crimes. Moorestown, New Jersey, a bedroom community north of Camden. May 23, 1998. More than a year after Officer Leone is shot, 3 men arrive at a Moorestown bank just before 8:30 a.m. They all carry assault rifles or machine pistols. The bank's doors are still locked. The robbers have lost precious time. They realize a bank employee has probably triggered the silent alarm. 2 of the robbers force tellers to empty the cash drawers. third gunman guards the lobby and calls out how much time has gone by. The robbers are tense. They decide the tellers are moving too slowly. The robbers frighten a late arriving teller. The getaway car won't start. The robbers panic. They threaten the teller, demanding her car keys. They escape in her car. Based on the robbers' MO, agents Tam and Walsh decide that it was probably the Rodriguez brothers.
Same builds.
Surveillance photos from the robbery provide even more clues. The weapons, masks, and even some of the clothing look identical to those used in the Woodland Bank robbery.
The pictures prove that they were, in fact, similar type clothing worn.
But the two agents lack enough evidence to charge either Rodriguez brother with bank robbery. The gang's MO seems to be evolving. With each robbery, they are becoming more dangerous.
The violence of this group was escalating. Eventually, somebody was going to be killed. Either a bank employee, a customer, or a police officer responding to a report of a bank robbery. There's no question somebody was going to be killed.
Agents Tam and Walsh meet with the local law enforcement agencies in the cities and towns in the Camden, New Jersey area, advising them of the gang's MO. In late July 1998, Agent Tam gets an intriguing lead from Lieutenant Roy Whitmore at the Merchantville, New Jersey Police Department.
I know an individual who may be able to help us. I know a gentleman.
He said, I have an individual who grew up with Rodriguez and who knows his brother fairly well, who might be willing to locate Crazy Charlie Rodriguez.
A year and a half into the investigation, the FBI has the potential to develop an informant with access to information about Charlie Rodriguez.
It was the biggest break possible because we had been looking essentially in the blind for somebody to cooperate with us and give Charlie Rodriguez up. Lieutenant Whitmore arranged for me to meet this person and formulate a way to draw Charlie Rodriguez out from wherever he was hiding in Philadelphia.
The informant is a former police officer who was forced to resign due to a minor weapons infraction.
Well, I found him to be intelligent, surprisingly articulate, considering that he was from a very tough urban environment. And I felt him to be honest and reliable.
The ex-cop says he wants to stop Charlie before anyone else, especially a police officer, is shot or killed.
We talked about his relationship with Joseph Rodriguez.
The agents theorize that Joseph is somehow in contact with his brother so they can plan robberies.
I suggested maybe he could find out something from Joseph as to if he ever saw his brother, was in contact with him, how he contacted him, and the frequency of the contact, because maybe we could take advantage of that to locate Charlie Rodriguez.
Agents Tam and Walsh develop a plan to use their informant to lure Charlie out of hiding. They know that the ex-cop used to sell guns.
He had worked for a firearms dealer, and that was known on the street in South Camden.
But now the ex-cop is legally barred from owning or selling firearms. The agents decide to use the informant's background to help establish his cover.
He would go to Joseph Rodriguez and ask him if he was interested in buying a handgun. We felt this would be a good introduction. that he wanted to now enter the criminal element.
I knew that that would interest Charlie Rodriguez because of his violent criminal nature. Criminals are always interested in acquiring new weapons. They can get rid of whatever weapon they've used before and move on to another one not connected with their prior crimes.
The ex-cop agrees to approach Joey at a family gathering a few days later. At first, Joey is wary.
Joseph knew that he had been a police officer and that he had been let go from the department, and he used this as an introduction. I was wrongly fired, they screwed me over, and heck with law enforcement.
Let's go join the party.
A few days later, Joey contacts the ex-cop and arranges a meeting.
He said, yeah, I talked to Charlie about it, and Charlie's interested in buying the handgun.
Not long at all. I'll call you.
So we knew we were making progress, and we knew that Charlie Rodriguez was nearby.
Agent Tam tells the undercover ex-cop that they need him to meet Charlie face to face.
Joseph Rodriguez would be very happy to buy the gun and then give it to Charlie Rodriguez, but that wouldn't help us. So I emphasized to him at that point that he was going to have to hand deliver the weapon to Charlie Rodriguez, where we could arrest him.
The FBI has no intention of actually delivering a working gun to either Rodriguez brother. The ex-cop goes to Joey's apartment to try to set up the sale.
The source was taking tremendous risks. He would have been killed immediately, in my opinion, if Charlie or Joey Rodriguez found out that he was cooperating with us.
Camden, New Jersey, 1998. An ex-cop embarks on a dangerous undercover operation for the FBI. Charlie Rodriguez, also known as Crazy Charlie, is suspected of shooting a police officer and robbing banks. The ex-cop attempts to infiltrate Charlie's crew by offering to sell him guns. The undercover informant meets with Charlie's brother. Joey Rodriguez, an ex-con who has served time for manslaughter, checks to see if he is wired.
He did not wear a recording device or anything because we were afraid if that was found, he would be immediately killed.
Slowly but surely, through a series of meetings, the ex-cop wins Joey's trust. The undercover informant tells FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh that Joey even asked him for advice on an upcoming robbery.
I said, that's a good idea. Tell them that you're interested in participating. And I thought maybe that would give us more information about where they were, you know, where they might be meeting, and we could interrupt them before they really got the whole thing going.
The ex-cop adds that Charlie Rodriguez is looking for a big score this time, $100,000 or more.
I said, well, then we're going to suggest a crime for them to commit. They want to rob somebody, we're going to give them a target to rob.
Agents Walsh and Tam plan a sting operation to lure Charlie Rodriguez into the open without endangering the public.
The key thing is believability. The criminal has to believe the scenario. There's going to have to be money, there has to be opportunity, there has to be a plausibility that the crime can be committed. I suggested we would have them rob an armored car servicing an automatic teller machine on the New Jersey Turnpike, because this would give us an environment where we could seal off a rest stop where the ATM was located and catch them there.
Agents Tam and Walsh pick a location they feel will work well.
And we selected a rest stop located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, The rest stop was located below the grade of the surrounding community. So if there was any gunfire or anything like that, the rounds would tend to be shot into a hill as opposed to flying all over the place.
The big thing for us was we felt that it was in a place that we could secure and control.
The undercover man pitches the robbery proposal to Joey, who carefully evaluates his every word.
He was able to go back to Joseph Rodriguez and say, I know this armored car driver who's willing to cooperate with us. And the armored car driver had significant sports betting debt, gambling debt, and that he wanted to be cut in on the proceeds of the robbery.
The undercover ex-cop says the armored car driver will be their inside man and hand over more than $200,000.
Well, it may just come to that. So?
2 days later, Joey gets back to the ex-cop with an answer.
Joseph Rodriguez said, Charlie thinks it's a great idea. Let's go ahead with a plan and do this.
Joey says he wants to check out the rest area with a third person.
Who's that? A friend of mine.
The ex-cop is concerned by the sudden change in plans.
Joey says, don't worry about him. He's okay. You can trust him.
The newcomer's name is Jose Soto.
Soto had an extensive and violent criminal record. He'd also been convicted of second-degree murder and was out on parole. And they drove to the rest stop and basically checked it out to see if they would be able to pull off this robbery.
The rest area has a back service road. It will allow them to enter and leave the rest stop without ever going onto the turnpike.
They knew they could get away and probably not be seen by anybody. The robbers liked everything about the location. And the FBI liked everything about their location because it was going to allow us to isolate them in an area where they could not escape and where the public generally would be protected from any sort of firearms activity, any sort of gunshots or anything that might occur.
Joey drives around the rest stop, tracing the route the armored car will take as it approaches the ATM.
Joseph Rodriguez was familiar with the location and comfortable with it. So rather than having the cooperator have to sell it to Charlie Rodriguez, Joseph Rodriguez sold it to him for us.
The undercover informant tells the FBI that Charlie Rodriguez, the target of the sting, has approved the robbery for August 27th. With the plan now in motion, the FBI approaches the agency responsible for the turnpike and the rest area, the New Jersey State Police. Agent Tam briefs Lieutenant Colonel Robert Dunlop. Dunlop's troopers will shut down the entire area and the turnpike to protect the public.
We always have the news helicopters up in the air. Radio stations would have broadcasted that there was a backup on the turnpike. To make this thing work, we had to coordinate this where we would shut this rest area down just moments before our suspects arrived, so it wouldn't spook anyone.
SWAT teams will be positioned at the turnpike entrances and inside buildings in the rest area. 3 days before the sting, Tam and Walsh meet with FBI and police SWAT leaders to go over the plan to capture the Rodriguez brothers and Soto.
We knew they were going to be heavily armed, and we knew that, at least in the case of Charles Rodriguez, they had a propensity to shoot people when confronted.
The plan is to evacuate the rest area minutes before the Rodriguez gang arrives. The FBI's informant will park behind the rest area, but then walk to the front of the building to get out of the line of fire.
Yeah, we're just talking about right now what we're going to be doing.
The SWAT team will be hidden inside a delivery truck. For backup, snipers will be positioned on a rooftop.
A tow truck would come down the access road driven by an FBI agent, and he was planning on pinning the car with the Rodriguez brothers in it at that location where they could not pull the car out.
Once the gang is trapped, the SWAT team will make the arrest.
The plan was a good one in the sense that if they had a lick of sense, they would surrender.
August 27th, 1998. Agents and state police assemble at the rest area.
Check, roger that.
The trap is set.
5 in position. Check.
Crazy Charlie is considered a very dangerous and unpredictable criminal. I think everyone that was involved in this operation knew that there was a great possibility that he wouldn't go down easy. As much as we planned, there was always the possibility that he would want to shoot it out.
Camden, New Jersey. Charlie Rodriguez is suspected of wounding a police officer and robbing banks. August 27th, 1998. FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh have devised a complex sting operation to trap the dangerous fugitive and his crew. Nearly 100 agents and law enforcement officers are in position at a New Jersey rest stop. But Charlie and his crew fail to show.
We're wondering where we had gone wrong. Had they found out something about it? Do they now suspect the source?
The agents are concerned about their informant, an ex-cop who helped them infiltrate the Rodriguez crew. If Charlie Rodriguez knows he's been set up, he could kill the FBI informant.
Early that morning, I get a call from the cooperator. He tells me that the Rodriguez brothers, who were to meet him at his apartment in Merchantville, New Jersey, had not arrived.
We instructed the source to reach out for Joey Rodriguez and find out why they hadn't showed up.
Despite the danger, the FBI's undercover man agrees to talk to Joey.
Where were you yesterday?
Joey says that the day before, sheriffs came looking for one of the crew, Jose Soto.
We were this close.
The undercover man informs the FBI about the problem.
The county sheriff's department had a warrant for Jose Soto for failure to pay child support. So that had kind of spooked them, and they decided not to go forward with it.
Agent Walsh asks deputies to tell Soto that all they want from him is a promise to pay his child support.
That's right.
The Rodriguez brothers and Soto are relieved. The next day, Joey meets with the ex-cop near the Ben Franklin Bridge to tell him Charlie has chosen a new date for the robbery, September 1st. The FBI sting operation is back on. According to their insider, Charlie and the crew are now supposed to arrive at his apartment early in the morning of the robbery. All of them will drive to the rest stop together.
There was some consideration to arresting him at the apartment. However, the SWAT team leaders felt that it was not as safe an environment as the rest stop because there were other people living in the apartments above and on either side.
The apartment complex was next to a playground and an elementary school. The whole environment would be awful for a violent arrest. So we wanted to get him out of there.
It was agreed upon that we would go with the original plan and it would take place at the rest stop.
The morning of the robbery, the FBI's undercover man waits at his apartment for the crew to arrive.
Up to this point, Charlie Rodriguez had not showed up. The source had not yet seen or met Charlie Rodriguez during all this.
He finally gets to meet with Charlie face to face.
Charlie, it's good to finally see you.
Can I get something to eat?
What do you want?
Donuts.
Donuts.
the source has an opportunity to go outside to get orange juice and donuts to bring back to them.
He takes the opportunity to call Agent Tam. The robbery is going forward as planned.
Yeah, they're in the apartment. It's definitely a go.
At the apartment, the crew puts on bulletproof vests and checks their weapons. The FBI's inside man puts on a distinctive baseball cap.
We had him wearing a baseball cap that everybody would recognize so that they would know that he was the cooperator.
The robbers leave for the rest area in 2 stolen cars. FBI surveillance keeps agents informed of the robbers' location so they can evacuate the rest area before they arrive.
We shut down both the rest area and the turnpike within a 10 to 15 minute time period.
The undercover man parks one of the stolen cars in a nearby neighborhood to use as a getaway car after the robbery. He then drives the Rodriguez brothers and Soto down the back road toward the rest area. Already there, FBI agents prepare for the sting.
I knew this was going to be a very dangerous operation. The source was going to be put in danger, plus a lot of agents and law enforcement personnel.
My concern was, do we not have anybody seriously injured or killed during this operation? We're just trying to arrest these people with the least amount of injury to anyone.
The FBI SWAT team waits inside a delivery truck.
We had FBI snipers on the rooftop of the rest stop in the event they got out of the car and tried to run away or fire at agents or anyone.
Nearly 100 law enforcement officers are hidden in and around the rest area.
Doesn't matter how many of these operations you've been on, there's always an adrenaline rush just prior to. What's going through my mind is that I hope we don't have gunfire. I hope no one's injured. I hope that we can take these people down without any serious problems.
The FBI's informant drives the crew along a back road into the rest area.
And the source parked exactly where he was told to park.
And our plan was to disable their vehicle by ramming it with a tow truck, which would probably knock the firearms out of their hands, and then they would be confronted by the SWAT team.
The FBI agent in the tow truck waits for the go-ahead signal, the undercover man leaving his car.
The main concern of this whole plan was getting the source out of the car, the safety of the source. And once he got out of the car, I felt everything would be fine.
But before the FBI source can get out of the car, Charlie senses that something is wrong. The informant's cover is in jeopardy of being blown. A wrong move now could cost him his life.
You want to ride in the trunk or you want to drive the car?
At a rest area in New Jersey, the FBI launches a sting operation to catch a gang of dangerous bank robbers. Gang leader Charlie Rodriguez senses a trap. He forces the driver of the car, an FBI cooperator, back into the car, preventing an FBI SWAT team from moving in. The undercover man is trapped. Agent Tam makes a difficult decision.
So I tell the SWAT team to go ahead and execute their secondary plan, which was the takedown. And that also involved the tow truck ramming the car.
The tow truck drives around to pin the robber's car.
As the tow truck approached, Charlie told the source, "Something's wrong here. This is a setup. Let's get out of here."
Needing to protect his identity, the FBI's undercover man speeds away from the SWAT team. One of the gunmen tries to shoot at the agents. The SWAT members open fire.
When the gunfire erupted, I think all of us in the back of our minds were saying, I hope we don't end up hitting our confidential source.
The tow truck slams into the rear end of the getaway car.
When it was finally over and we had these people safely in custody, I think everyone felt a tremendous amount of relief and satisfaction that it went down well.
Incredibly, the undercover man has not been wounded. FBI agents recover a huge arsenal of weapons from the Rodriguez brothers in Soto.
The amount of weapons and the amount of ammunition that was recovered from inside this car was something that I have never seen or heard of before. It's more firepower than would be necessary to rob 1,000 banks.
The weapons included an AR-15 converted to automatic, a machine pistol with a silencer, and an AK-47 Chinese clone also converted to automatic. Each of the gunmen also carried sidearms with the serial numbers drilled out, and dozens of fully loaded magazines. Altogether, they had well over 1,000 rounds of ammunition.
Charlie Rodriguez made a remark that if he had known what was going to happen, he would have brought his hand grenades. For them to actually have been arrested without anyone getting hurt with the kind of ammunition and the kind of weapons that they had in their person was an incredible feat.
The Rodriguez brothers were violent criminals. I mean, they'd killed before, they would kill again. And the only solution to that is to lock them up forever, which was the ultimately what happened here.
On March 30th, 2000, Jose Soto was sentenced in federal court to 37 years for the attempted armored car robbery and weapons violations. Charlie and Joey Rodriguez are sentenced to life without parole for 2 bank robberies, the attempted robbery of an armored car, and weapons violations.
FBI, freeze! Get down on the ground!
The family vanishes without a trace. Local authorities find no leads to the identity of their abductors. When stolen weapons began to surface, investigators realized the perpetrators were part of a nationwide rampage of violence. They were dangerous men who would stop at nothing to escape justice.
When a family was murdered in Arkansas, it seemed like an isolated event. But soon the crime was revealed to be part of an ever-widening circle of violence that defined a new age of domestic terrorism. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. For the killers, the triple homicide in Arkansas was simply a means to an end. They made their way across the country, letting nothing stand between them and their twisted mission. And we would stop at nothing to prevent their rampage.
January 1996. Tilly, Arkansas, a small rural neighborhood, was home to William Mueller. Mueller was a gun enthusiast and self-employed electrician. His wife Nancy homeschooled their 8-year-old daughter Sarah. Returning from a day of work, the Muellers were confronted by 2 men in their home.
Hands behind your back! Hands behind your back, ma'am, now!
They were dressed as FBI agents, but they were imposters. They were after the large supply of weapons and cash that Mueller had in his home. When the 52-year-old Mueller refused to cooperate, the intruders separated the family and tortured them. Nancy Mueller's mother, Earlene Branch, grew concerned when she hadn't heard from her daughter in 2 weeks. She turned to the sheriff for help.
I usually hear from her at least.
She explained that the family often traveled to gun shows, yet her daughter always called when they returned.
This is unusual.
Although the Muellers lived in a neighboring county, the sheriff knew the family and agreed to look into the matter. He checked with local authorities and talked to Mueller's neighbors. Though Sheriff Jay Winters found no trace of the family, people who knew them weren't concerned.
For the most part, there wasn't a lot of fear. Most people thought, you know, maybe they had just gone off somewhere and wanted to be on their own for a while.
On February 11th, a month after their disappearance, a farmer found the Mueller's Jeep concealed and abandoned off the highway, miles from their home. Detective Aaron Duval from the Pope County Sheriff's Office was sent to investigate.
It was approximately 20 miles north of Russellville, off the State Highway 7, hid behind a brush pile. I was called out that day, went up there, took pictures of the vehicle and the trailer.
Inside the Jeep, Duval found Nancy Mueller's purse. It held her wallet and ID. The trailer, used by Bill Mueller to transport munitions to gun shows, was empty. Several more months passed, and the Muellers were still missing. 40 miles from Tilly, an elderly couple enjoyed a day of fishing in a bayou near Russellville. While waiting for a fish to bite, the woman snagged her line. She pulled up an old tennis shoe. A leg bone jutted out of it. Horrified, she cut it loose and went for help. Within hours, search teams combed the bayou organized by Sheriff Winters. They used large metal hooks to drag the bottom. Divers swam the depths. By day's end, parts of a single body were recovered, a murder victim.
The torso had a rock attached to it. There was a lot of tape on it. The head had a bag of some type on it, duct tape around the head. Very disturbing to us because it was obvious, you know, that this was a different type of thing than we typically deal with. It was an obvious execution. It was just some cold-hearted people.
Investigators determined it was the body of a small female. They thought it might have been a 6-year-old girl who had been abducted several counties away the previous year. When the clothing and size didn't match her description, another possibility became apparent. It could have been Sarah Mueller. The next day, 2 more partial bodies were found. All 3 torsos had been weighed down with rocks, and each head was covered with a plastic bag secured with duct tape. Dental records, DNA, and clothing confirmed the identity of the bodies. They were William Mueller, his wife Nancy, and their daughter Sarah. The missing persons case was now a grisly triple homicide investigation.
It was bad for Bill and Nancy to have to die the way they did. But for a 7-year-old girl to die that way, to be wrapped with plastic, to be wrapped with duct tape, to have a 60-pound rock strapped to her body and thrown into a lake, there was no excuse.
During the autopsy, the coroner determined that the three had probably been in the water since January 11th, the last day they were seen. A later examination revealed several specks of blue paint stuck to the tape that bound the bodies. Investigators sent the paint specks to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. for analysis. A forensic chemist determined that they were consistent with auto paint. The challenge was to match them to a specific make and model. Using infrared light, the examiner established the chemical composition of the paint. This chemical signature was fed into a computer database containing similar information from every auto make, model, and color dating back to 1934. The results gave the Arkansas investigators their first lead.
So we thought that the vehicle that the bodies were transported in possibly was blue. It was determined a particular blue color, metallic blue. The FBI even narrowed it down that it was a General Motors vehicle.
Investigators reasoned that they were looking for at least 2 perpetrators. One must have driven the blue car with the bodies in it to the water, while the other followed in the Mueller's Jeep. By the time they dumped the bodies, the Muellers were probably already dead, suffocated by the plastic bags. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms from Little Rock, Arkansas was called in. ATF agent Glenn Jordan headed the case.
Our jurisdiction lay in the fact that Mueller was a former federal firearms licensee, that his firearms were missing, and the fact that Mr. Mueller and his family had been murdered.
The ATF had a complete record of Mueller's gun inventory before he forfeited his federal license. With no reports of gun sales since then, agents figured the missing weapons had been stolen.
Our goal was to enter the serial numbers of those firearms into the National Crime Information Computer in case those firearms turned up later. That would give us a lead to follow in the investigation.
Jordan was already familiar with Bill Mueller's name since the family had been the victims of a theft 1 year earlier. At the time of that robbery, Mueller reported $40,000 worth of merchandise stolen, including 5 firearms and ammunition. Since the Muellers had been victims of a robbery and homicide within the same year, agents believed that the family had been targeted by a group who used and sold stolen weapons, perhaps members of an anti-government militia.
Come on in, fellas.
Investigators returned to inspect the Muellers' belongings. After the family had disappeared, relatives had taken most of their valuable items. The landlord stored the remaining possessions in his garage. They found a Colt .45 gun case labeled with a serial number, but the gun was missing. They also found a picture of the family with some friends. The ATF entered the serial number of the Colt .45 into the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center. They got a hit. The handgun had been traced to a man named Travis Brake. He had been arrested 5 months earlier in Seattle, Washington for carrying a concealed weapon. Because the gun he was carrying was now linked to another crime, Brake was arrested again by the Seattle police, this time for possession of a stolen weapon.
Also involved in a murder. What do you know about it?
Jordan and Duval flew to Washington State to question him.
Mr. Brake was interviewed and advised the Seattle Police Department that he had purchased this handgun at a gun show in Seattle, Washington, and he described two individuals that he had purchased the firearm from, one in particularly that he remembered.
Investigators showed him the photograph found among the Mueller's possessions. Brake identified one of the men who sold him the gun.
That's him. Right here.
His name was Keith Collins. Agents asked Bill and Nancy Mueller's friends if they had ever heard of him. Collins had once been close with the Muellers. They had attended gun shows together. Investigators discovered that Keith Collins' real name was Chevie Kehoe. The ATF learned that Chevie Kehoe had an extensive record for firearms violations. Kehoe was also actively involved in the white supremacist movement. Members of this growing faction are strongly anti-government, heavily armed, and considered dangerous. Chevie Kehoe became a prime suspect in the Mueller triple homicide. Investigators needed more evidence before they moved in for an arrest. Almost a year after the triple murder and robbery of Bill, Nancy, and Sarah Mueller, investigators were still hunting for the killers, believed to be militant white supremacists. In Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 11 months after the crime, a trooper noticed a blue Chevy Suburban parked in a handicapped space. He found a young couple sleeping inside. The man said his name was Sean Haynes.
Got any info?
He and his pregnant girlfriend had pulled over to rest for a while. From the bumper stickers on his truck, the trooper believed he was a white supremacist. He asked Haynes if he was carrying any weapons. Haynes showed him two guns in the back of his vehicle. The trooper called in the serial numbers and discovered they had been stolen. One, an AR-15 rifle, had been taken from the Mueller's house in Arkansas. Haynes was arrested. Alerted that one of Mueller's guns had turned up in South Dakota, investigators from Arkansas went there to interview Haynes. Haynes revealed that he had traded another firearm for the AR-15 rifle at a Washington State motel 6 months earlier.
Can you explain how they got there?
The name of the man he swapped with was Chevie Kehoe, Chevie Kehoe's eldest son. Now Chevie was also connected to the Mueller murders. Investigators weren't through with Haynes, though. They took a paint sample from his blue Suburban. They determined that the sample did not match the paint found on the duct tape wrapped around the Muellers. Haynes had nothing more to offer. The investigation turned to Chevie Kehoe, but he was nowhere to be found. Several weeks later, Ohio State Highway Patrol Officer Harold Harker had a routine assignment: to catch speeders in the small town of Wilmington, not far from Cincinnati. While observing traffic, he noticed a blue Chevy Suburban going slower than the speed limit. Harker, a 25-year veteran who was now retired, recalled how he thought the people inside were acting strangely as they drove by.
As it approached, I saw it did not have a front license plate, and as it passed me, the driver didn't acknowledge my presence in any way, didn't look at the patrol car, just kept both hands on the wheel fixed straight ahead. However, the passenger not only looked at me as he went by, he actually turned in the seat and looked out the rear window to watch me.
Harker knew that Washington State required vehicles to have license plates on both front and back. He called in the plate number and followed the Suburban while waiting for his dispatcher to come back with some information.
And they returned and told me that the plate apparently did match the vehicle, however it was expired. So at that point I made the determination that once we got into Wilmington where the berms were wider, I would initiate a traffic stop there.
Harker's car was equipped with a video camera mounted on the dashboard. A microphone was fastened to Harker's shirt. Harker asked the passenger and driver for ID. While talking to the men, Harker became more troubled. Neither had any ID. The driver was speaking in a very animated fashion, while the passenger looked straight ahead.
At this point, I was concerned enough with my safety and so on. I wanted to get the people away from the vehicle, and I wanted to, here again, get them separated, get the driver into my car so that I'm a little more in control of their actions.
Let's sit back here with me a second, sir.
The driver eventually followed Harker to his patrol car.
Say you borrowed the vehicle? Say you borrowed the vehicle? It's actually what I'll tell you what the process is. Okay.
When the officer tried to frisk him, the driver quickly stepped back and became defensive.
And he actually moved away from me and used the terminology, "I don't want to be violated like that." In 25 years of criminal patrol operations, I had never had anyone use that particular terminology. And that, coupled with the appearance of the two young men, the fact that they had close-cropped military-style haircuts, very clean cut, and the driver had a Marine Corps type cover, I felt comfortable that I was probably dealing with militia personnel at that point.
Across the highway, a fellow officer, Deputy Sheriff Robert Gates, saw Harker talking with the driver and turned around to assist him. This was a common practice, since officers often worked alone in rural sections of the state.
His whole purpose is to monitor the entire situation. He doesn't get involved with answering questions, giving direction. That's my job. His job is purely to watch and observe.
The men told him they were looking for work on construction sites. Harker told the driver that if he or his passenger could not provide identification, their vehicle would be confiscated. The driver attempted to escape. As both officers tried to apprehend him, the passenger jumped from the vehicle and started firing. The passenger fled the scene while Harker tried to stop the driver. His arm became caught in the door, but he managed to free himself. The other suspect escaped into the woods. Gates pursued him. He feared an ambush among the dense trees, so he turned around. Harker, back at his car with a shot-out tire, called for help. Within moments, the rest of the Wilmington, Ohio Police Department was notified about the shootout. Officer Robert Martin heard the bulletin and then observed a Suburban in an electrical supply company parking lot. He called in his location as he went to investigate.
Only 10-6 with that suspect vehicle behind the building supply.
The Suburban's driver opened fire. Another police policemen arrived to assist him. The suspect had disappeared into the industrial area. He'd shot 32 rounds. One wounded a bystander. Back at the first shootout site, investigators were trying to piece together what happened and to learn the shooters' identities. Using metal detectors, they searched for shell casings. The entire area was meticulously photographed and all evidence collected. The small town of Wilmington had never seen anything like this. Police mobilized a manhunt for the two armed suspects. The search continued into the night. Reinforcements were brought in from neighboring counties. Police knew the suspects would resort to violence in order to escape. They had to find them before anyone was killed. The suspects in the shootout were still at large. The ATF and Ohio State Police examined the second gunfight location in the Chevy Suburban. The entire crime scene was processed for fingerprints in hopes of determining the shooter's identity. Inside the vehicle were assault rifles, thousands of rounds of ammunition, military supplies, and medical packs. Investigators traced the munitions through receipts supplied by the manufacturers. Much of the ammo and gun parts belonged to the murdered Arkansas gun dealer, William Mueller. The extent of the military supplies suggested the shooters were violent members of an anti-government group. Ohio investigators notified the FBI. FBI agent Bill Hargraves from the Cincinnati field office spearheaded the investigation.
The case became a domestic terrorism case, basically because of the items that were found in the Suburban. They had numerous weapons, ammunition, law enforcement, clothing and equipment, law enforcement identification.
Yes, this is Trooper Herman with Ohio State Police.
Ohio State troopers traced the Suburban's registration to a man named Jacob Settle from Spokane, Washington. On the day of the shootout, Settle told the trooper he was with friends in Washington State, more than 2,000 miles from Ohio. He also claimed that he had sold the vehicle to a man named Chevie Kehoe. It would take several days for authorities to corroborate Settle's story. Ohio State troopers compared a copy of Settle's driver's license photo against images of the fugitives caught on tape. The picture didn't match. The videotape was their best clue. Ohio State Police released the tape nationwide to try to find the shooters' identities. The shootout video made primetime news around the country and produced the break investigators needed. A Washington State TV reporter recognized the driver as a white supremacist she had interviewed several years earlier for the TV show Hard Copy. His name was Chevie Kehoe. Several cops and residents confirmed the identification. Back in Arkansas, Pope County investigators working on the Mueller triple homicide also watched the video. For the first time, they saw Chevie Kehoe. They assisted Ohio State and federal investigators in the manhunt, since Chevie was also a suspect in the Arkansas murders. Duval and Jordan traveled to Ohio to meet with FBI agent Hargraves to share information. They told Hargraves that the killers used a blue General Motors vehicle to transport the victims. Hargrave thought the connection was strong since the truck abandoned after the shootout was a blue Chevy Suburban, and more of Mueller's property was found inside. The team agreed that if paint scrapings from the Suburban matched the blue paint specks found on the victims, they would have forensic evidence tying Chevie Kehoe to the Arkansas crimes. At the FBI lab in Washington, D.C., examiners determined that the paint specks did not match the sample found in Arkansas. FBI agent Jim Shenandoah was called in, a specialist in tracking domestic terrorists like Chevie Kehoe.
We found out that they had engaged in militia-type activities, that they had anti-government views, they were very anti-law enforcement at the time. So it really heightened the security in terms of what these suspects were going to do next.
Seeking more information on Chevie Kehoe, a Washington State trooper interviewed his father, Kirby, at his home in Colesville. The trooper asked him if he recognized the men in the video. Kirby did not identify his son Chevie, but he said the second man was his younger son Shane.
We found this unusual because the video made it fairly easily to identify the driver, who was Chevie, but not quite as easy to identify Shane. We thought that perhaps there might have been some favoritism for one son over the other.
The FBI looked into the background of 23-year-old Chevie and 21-year-old Shane Kehoe.
Chevie Kehoe was linked to a variety of crimes. In addition to the 3 murders in Arkansas, he was linked to a murder in Washington State and a murder in, we believe, in Idaho. He also committed a series of burglaries, robberies, and extortions, and also interstate transportation of stolen property.
APBs were issued for the Kehoe brothers. On February 18th, investigators picked up the Kehoe's trail in Frankfort, Ohio, 45 miles from the shootout site in Wilmington. A Chevy Monte Carlo was found abandoned in a grocery store parking lot. It had been reported stolen a mile from where the shootout occurred. Authorities suspected that at least one of the Kehoes had stolen it to escape the manhunt. The keys were all the robber had left. Investigators feared the desperate brothers would stop at nothing to escape custody. State police fanned out to canvass the area, hoping someone may have seen one of the fugitives. A mile away at the Lake Hill campground, the Kehoe's path reemerged. Investigators learned that the pair had camped there with their families in an RV, but authorities arrived too late. Just 2 days earlier, the motorhome had pulled out. No one knew if the brothers were on board. The FBI released a nationwide APB for the vehicle. As the weeks passed, people reported sightings of the RV. They had also seen women and children in the camper. Each time authorities responded, the camper was gone. The Kehoe's trail heated up again 150 miles away in Indianapolis, Indiana, where another stolen vehicle was recovered. Inside, investigators found clothing and a gas receipt signed by Chevie Kehoe, but no trace of his brother Shane. The van had been stolen 13 miles from where Chevie fled the blue Suburban after firing on Ohio officers. The Kehoes were still one step ahead. The trail of plundered cars signaled that the Kehoe's crime spree would not cease until authorities stopped them.
There it is. We felt early on that if confronted again by law enforcement that there would be a great probability that there would be another shooting involved and that innocent people would be hurt.
Across the country, local and federal investigators were put on high alert. They needed to find the Kehoe brothers before they struck again. In Arizona, a state trooper came upon an RV that fit the description of the Kehoe's camper. It had no license plates, and its shades were drawn. He called in reinforcements. He knew the brothers were armed and dangerous and would shoot to kill. Within moments, a SWAT team surrounded the RV. They hoped the nighttime assault would catch the Kehoes off guard and lessen the chances of another armed confrontation. An Arizona SWAT team was on the move to catch the Kehoe brothers, armed fugitives wanted in 2 states for murder and attempted murder.
Freeze!
They thought they had them cornered. It was the wrong RV. Several days later, a Wyoming highway patrolman found the Kehoe's mobile home broken down and abandoned on a desolate stretch of road. The FBI was informed and asked that the RV be towed into town for inspection. The Wyoming State Police obtained a warrant and documented its contents. This vehicle, like the Suburban, held a large cache of ammunition, guns, several fake FBI jackets, and U.S. Marshals badges. One discovery stopped the officers in their tracks.
Hey, come take a look at this.
A box of explosive components, including batteries used to detonate bombs. Fearing a booby trap, the troopers called in the ATF bomb squad. Nearby business and government offices were evacuated. Inch by inch, the bomb squad probed the RV. A thorough investigation revealed no live devices. But the danger wasn't over. According to ATF agent Jordan, the Kehoe brothers had a well-equipped bomb factory, which increased their potential for violence.
The bomb-making components that we found consisted of some metal cylinders, several types of chemicals, mixing bowls, hot plate coffee filters, instructions for making homemade blasting caps, quite an assortment of bomb-making components.
Receipts on board revealed the family's path since leaving Ohio. They traveled through West Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, Texas, and Montana before ditching the mobile home in Wyoming. The vehicle offered few clues to the Kehoe's current location.
All we knew was that Chevy was last known to be in Indianapolis, where the stolen van was recovered. We presumed that Shane and the families had made it as far as Casper, where the camper had broken down. From that point on, we basically had a cold trail.
To entice the public's help, the FBI and ATF announced that they had joined to offer a reward for the pair's arrest and conviction.
The fact that it was a serious matter involving law enforcement, the fact that they had some affiliation to supremacy groups, and the fact that they were dangerous individuals, we were able to obtain a $60,000 reward for their apprehension.
More than 100 tips came in. The local leads were handled by the Ohio State Police, while the FBI and ATF pursued those from out of state. On On June 16th, investigators got the news they were hoping for. A sheriff in Stevens County, Washington, received a call from a friend of Shane Kehoe.
I'll get right back with you. Thanks.
Shane wanted to turn himself in. The 21-year-old surrendered to the authorities and informed them where he and his brother had been for the last few months. After the Wilmington shootout, Shane had stolen a car and returned to the campground. There he gathered his and his brother's families and drove to Wyoming, where he met Chevie. Soon after the Kehoes were reunited, the RV broke down. Chevie told investigators that he and his brother had finally found refuge with their families on a remote ranch in rural southern Utah. A farmer and his wife had taken them in and offered them room and board in exchange for doing work on the ranch. Soon the situation began to deteriorate. Chevie couldn't control his explosive temper. Both Shane and his wife, Tana, grew concerned. Chevie talked of building his own white supremacist order. He thought of killing his wife, Karina, because of Native American ancestry in her family. He even talked of murdering his own parents, Kirby and Gloria, in order to raise his 6 younger brothers with his beliefs. On June 12th, almost 4 months after the shootouts in Ohio, Chevie finally turned his growing paranoia on his own brother.
Shane explained to us that they had recently gotten into a fight and that he feared for his life as well as the lives of his family.
Shane also told investigators that Chevie had several items in his possession that belonged to the Muellers. Chevie had also admitted to suffocating the Mueller family. Not knowing what Chevie would do next, Shane and his family fled Utah in the middle of the night, driving almost 1,000 miles back to Washington State. Authorities inspected the truck Shane drove, looking for additional evidence. Lab examiners discovered that the vehicle, which belonged to Chevie Kehoe, had been repainted from its original blue color. FBI forensic chemist Ron Mentold explains.
We often see repainted vehicles in the laboratory here, and we can determine how it was originally painted. The layers of paint can many times be thought of as a stack of cards that is loosely adhered to each other. Okay, and any one card can be withdrawn from the layer and sampled individually. So the ace of diamonds, which is a primer layer, would be different in chemistry and color from the king of spades, which would be on top.
The test results were conclusive. The composition of the blue paint found on the Kehoe's vehicle matched the specs found on the Muellers' bodies. The evidence against Chevie Kehoe was compelling, but capturing him would be no easy task. Investigators would have to travel to Chevie's remote hideout in Utah, where an arrest team could be seen approaching from miles away. Wanted for triple homicide in Arkansas and attempted murder in Ohio, the white supremacist Chevie Kehoe was heavily armed and hiding with his family on an isolated ranch. Apprehending the criminal in the wide open spaces of southern Utah would be dangerous for agents and Chevie's family. The FBI and ATF needed an arrest plan that minimized the risk. Agent Will Long was in charge of coordinating the plan. He is in shadow in order to protect the sensitive nature of his current case.
Chevie's children and his wife were there, and we certainly didn't want to get involved in a situation where they were in the middle of a shooting situation or possible hostage situation.
Long enlisted the help of Rodney Levitt, the farmer on whose land the brothers had been living. Levitt agreed to help the FBI due to his concern for Chevie's children.
He told us that On a regular basis, Chevie Kehoe would, at his request, travel into Cedar City to run errands for him related to the farming operation. And in this case, they had previously talked about Chevie coming into town on this day to pick up some feed from the local feed store. And we decided that we could use that as an opportunity to take him at the feed store in an environment that we could control.
That left agents only 2 hours to get into position before Chevie arrived in town with Levitt.
2 hours is a short amount of time. We placed surveillance units along the road that would be in a position to call out the location of Chevie Kehoe and Mr. Levitt as they made their way into town.
The plan was working perfectly until Chevie Kehoe made an unscheduled stop. The FBI didn't know if Kehoe was onto them and was making a run for it. The agent on location radioed in for assistance. He waited for instructions to apprehend Kehoe or get Levitt to safety. For a few breathless moments, no one knew what would happen next. Chevie returned to the truck with a soda. To the undercover agent, it seemed that Chevie had no suspicions and returned to the road. Back in town, more than 25 agents waited for the arrival of Chevie and Levitt. Snipers were positioned on the rooftops, and the feed store was surrounded. Agents were also located in the nearby neighborhood. Their objective was to prevent Chevie from escaping and taking hostages. While Agent Long loaded hay in front of the feed store, his plan nearly went awry.
As we were listening to the radio, we heard one of the surveillance units call out that Chevie had crossed a landmark that was approximately 1 minute away from the feed store.
At that very moment, the farmer unwittingly pulled into the parking spot the FBI was holding for Chevie. Agent Long had a split second to act.
Sir, I ran across the parking lot with my badge and credentials in my hand. I told this man that a dangerous fugitive was about to pull into the parking lot and that we were going to arrest him right here, and that he needed to immediately get in his vehicle and get out of the parking lot.
The farmer complied, and Long returned to his position. Seconds later, Chevie Kehoe pulled into the parking lot.
FBI, get on the ground! Get down on the ground! Get down on the ground!
Long and his team pounced on the suspected murderer, leaving him no time to reach for a concealed weapon. After 5 months of a nationwide manhunt, the FBI had finally captured Chevie Kehoe. Back at the ranch, there was still the matter of taking Chevie's wife, Karina, and their 3 kids into custody. Once again, Levitt offered his help.
Apparently, Mr. Levitt had an injured back, and Karina would routinely come out and open the gate for Mr. Levitt to let him into the property as a courtesy to him because of his injury.
To open the gate, Karina had to leave the house, giving agents the opportunity to arrest her. Long hid in the back of the truck with 2 other agents.
Just as we anticipated, Karina came out and opened the gate, and as she was looking at the gate and concentrating on manipulating the latch, we jumped out of the back of the truck and immediately searched her and found a loaded 9mm pistol in her back pocket.
Get out on the ground, ma'am. Get out on the ground. Get out on the ground. Spread your legs. Spread your arms.
Long obtained a search warrant for the Kehoe's trailer on the Levitt property.
Okay.
Before inspecting it, the FBI safely escorted the children outside and entrusted them to the farmer. Back inside, Long discovered a well-stocked armory. Chevie Kehoe, anticipating a siege, had stationed loaded guns at every window. With both brothers finally in custody, the pair was transported back east to face 16 state and local charges. Chevie would first be tried in Arkansas on federal charges. With the Kehoes locked up, U.S. Attorney Paula Casey had several months to prepare a solid case.
The federal agents in Aaron Duvall, Jay Winters, came here and they laid out the evidence they had of all the various crimes that had been committed. And after we examined everything that was there was sort of this growing realization as we reviewed these things that it was a racketeering case.
Placing Chevie's illegal activities under a racketeering umbrella, Casey needed to demonstrate that crimes were committed in order to expand his white supremacist movement.
The racketeering statute lets us give a jury the complete picture of what happened. It lets us put that together so that all of the evidence can be placed before the jury for their decision.
Chevie Kehoe was ultimately charged with 57 federal crimes, including the brutal murder of Bill and Nancy and their 8-year-old daughter, Sarah.
Chevie Kehoe was tried, and following a 3-month jury trial, he was found guilty of racketeering, and as a result of his conviction, he received a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, because in the federal system there is no parole.
As for brother Shane, despite his claims of self-defense, he was found guilty of the state charges brought against him. Among them, attempted murder for the shootout in Wilmington. He is currently serving 24.5 years.
The reason I think every agency was so cooperative in working on this was just that it was a horrible crime. It was a crime that was obviously hard for anybody to figure out why it happened, exactly how it would happen. It was just one of those things that everybody wanted to help out, and they knew that we couldn't do it all ourselves, and if it had been their case, they wouldn't have been able to do it by themselves either. So it was just a matter of everybody getting together, because the bottom line was there were some bad people out there, and everybody just needed to get involved for a common cause, and that was to put the bad guy behind bars.
In the Midwest, a fugitive drug dealer will do anything to avoid capture. His desperate run is fueled by drugs and punctuated by gunfights. As he barrels across 2 states, local and federal authorities are determined to fight back and to stay in pursuit.
When law enforcement officers become targets, no one is safe. So when a crystal meth dealer on the run from the law began shooting cops, it took more than police to stop him. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. With a fearless killer on the loose in the Midwest, residents had to help the FBI and state and local police bring down the dealer and deliver him to justice.
On February 2nd, 2000, on the quiet back roads of Lincoln County, Nebraska, Lincoln County Sheriff's Deputy Stan McKnight was on routine patrol when he saw a vehicle rapidly approach from behind. A maroon pickup truck sped past. McKnight spotted Texas plates on the pickup, but he could not make out the numbers. The deputy began cautious pursuit. Recent weather conditions had created black ice on the roads. Without the benefit of streetlights, the roads appeared normal, but were treacherously covered with patches of slick ice.
Subject is now turning off on the side
Deputy
road.
McKnight radioed for assistance.
Please alert all available units.
Several Nebraska State Patrol troopers mobilized to try to intercept the pickup. Whoever was in the truck seemed to have no regard for his own safety. Since the roads were free of other traffic and no one else was in danger, McKnight decided high-speed pursuit was not worth the risk.
It appeared as though he knew the area that he was in, and due to the fact that he would take more chances and drive faster than I would, he was able to disappear.
Eventually, the truck vanished into the night.
I had called in for assistance from the department, and all the deputies and state troopers are working, and we combed the whole area and looking for that vehicle, and it was to no avail.
Nebraska police issued a be on the lookout bulletin for the maroon pickup with Texas plates. But that night, no one spotted the vehicle or its driver. A week later, and 40 miles away in North Platte, Nebraska, deputies responded to a call from a farmer. He hadn't used his barn in years, so the farmer was surprised to discover someone had been working there recently, leaving a strange workplace behind. The deputies found chemicals and other items available in farm supply stores. They'd often seen this combination of materials in the area before. They were the ingredients needed to make methamphetamine, an illegal drug. A powerful stimulant, meth is also known as crank or speed. It's easy to make with materials commonly found on farms. In recent years, the Midwestern countryside has seen an epidemic of methamphetamine production, according to Lincoln County, Nebraska Sheriff's Corporal Casey Nelms.
Methamphetamine labs are a problem because it's such a rural area, a lot of abandoned farmhouses, farmsteads where people don't live anymore, gives opportunity for these people to go in and manufacture this drug pretty much undetected.
The drug is addictive and extremely dangerous. Users feel a temporary high, then intense paranoia and a craving for more. Most users become aggressive and desperate. When meth labs pop up in an area, violent crime follows. During their search of the meth lab in the North Platte barn, deputies found several pieces of mail. They were addressed to Charles Moses Jr. of Nocona, Texas. Deputies contacted Texas authorities asking for information on Moses. They received photos of Moses and learned there were warrants for his arrest for the theft of several firearms. Nebraska investigators also learned Moses drove a maroon pickup truck with Texas plates. The make and model of the truck matched the description of the one that had evaded Deputy McKnight only a week earlier. If Charles Moses was manufacturing methamphetamine, there was a good chance he was using it too. That might explain why Moses drove so recklessly on the night of the chase.
The people that use this become very paranoid. They have no pain threshold. Sometimes they're up for days, and they're just a real problem. They're hard to handle.
During their rounds in the tightly knit communities in the area, police showed the photo of Moses and asked if anyone had noticed an outsider fitting his description. Some residents reported seeing him in the past.
We were pretty sure that he was in the area.
But no one had seen him in several days, and Moses had no local address. At 11 p.m. on February 12, 2000, a week after the meth lab was discovered, Lincoln County Corporal Casey Nelms was about to start his shift. As was his routine, he picked up a cup of coffee before hitting the road. But that night would prove to be anything but routine. Through the window, Nelms spotted a vehicle that matched the description of Charles Moses's pickup truck.
Have a good night.
You too.
But he needed to get a look at the driver.
When he got out of the pickup, he resembled the individual that we were looking for.
The truck had Texas plates.
7-16, 1089.
Nelms headed out to check the man's ID. But the man spoke first.
What the roads like out there?
They're pretty slick. Where are you heading?
Just kind of heading out. Just going out.
I approached him and asked him if he was where he was going, what he was doing. I asked him for his identification, and when he handed it to me, the name on the driver's license was Charles Moses. You're under arrest. I really expected that once I got a hold of him in the vehicle that I was going to be able to, take him out of the vehicle without any problem and place him under arrest, but he was just spectacularly strong. I just couldn't do anything with him, except just keep struggling with him to try to keep the weapon away from my face.
Moses fired.
Cars parking lot, shots fired. I was pretty sure 2 of my rounds hit. The second round I saw it hit the back of the cab, and the third round it also hit the back of the cab.
Nelms tried to follow Moses, but the fugitive drove with the recklessness of a man on methamphetamine and disappeared. Nebraska State Patrol officers heard the shots fired call and joined the search for the would-be cop killer. Lincoln County Sheriff's Deputy Stan McKnight, who had chased the maroon truck before, heard about the pursuit on the radio. He needed to position himself in a place where he was likely to intercept Moses.
There's an area that's commonly called the correction line. It's an area where I could see the best I thought possible 3 different roads intersecting that area. And that was the middle one. I could watch a mile behind me, that one, and a mile in front of me.
McKnight waited in the dark, hoping he was in the right place.
After about 10 or 15 minutes of sitting there, a vehicle did come from the west at the very road intersection that I was at. And as they got right to the front of my vehicle, I turned my headlights on and I saw the vehicle that was the same identical vehicle that I'd seen less than 2 weeks before. He was traveling in excess of 70 to 80 mile an hour, and being nighttime conditions, it was hard to see him, and he was out of distance to me quite rapidly.
Deputy McKnight tried to maintain a visual of the pickup truck. But the vehicle seemed to disappear yet again. McKnight changed tactics.
At that point, he had pretty much, got ahead of me. At the same time, I had to slow down and check driveways and intersecting road intersections to make sure he hadn't turned off on me.
Then the deputy saw a vehicle's brake lights in the distance. It was idling at an empty intersection. Deputy McKnight called for backup. Moses had already fired at one officer. It was too dangerous for the deputy to advance alone. He waited for the backup officers. Before they came, Moses made his move. One bullet entered Stan McKnight's head. Another ripped through his hand.
Upon figuring out that I'd been hit by a bullet, I was going to try to call to the rest of the officers around to let them know what was going on. Only when I reached for the mic, I couldn't talk. My mouth was all full of blood and I was starting to choke. So I felt around and I found some napkins in the seat, and I got them shoved up in my mouth to make the blood go out, and I got it spit out, and then I could talk and let them know that I'd been hit and that the subject had went on to the left and was going to be chasing him.
Despite his injuries, Deputy McKnight was not going to give up his pursuit.
The wind was coming through the holes in the windshield, blowing glass all over. My left eye was completely shut from blood. My right eye, I was just blinking, but I could still see enough with my headlights to keep going down the road.
Based on the coordinates McKnight radioed, several teams of Nebraska State Patrol troopers headed towards stakeout positions in the area. They drove with their headlights and flashers off so they wouldn't alert Moses. Troopers in 2 cars positioned themselves on a dark county road and waited. Minutes later, headlights appeared. It was Moses. One of the troopers spotted a gun. After firing a full clip at Moses, the trooper realized a bullet had torn through his bulletproof vest. He was losing blood fast. The chest wound appeared to be life-threatening. They called for an ambulance from a hospital dozens of miles away. In the dark prairie, the troopers hoped their fallen friend would survive. In a frantic escape, Charles Moses had shot both a sheriff's deputy and a state trooper. Though gravely injured, Deputy McKnight continued pursuit of Moses, a man willing to kill to stay on the run. In February of 2000, Nebraska authorities confronted Charles Moses, a Texas fugitive suspected of running a methamphetamine lab. Escaping, he led police on a high-speed chase, shooting one deputy in the head and a state trooper in the chest before vanishing into the night. Paramedics stabilized the wounded trooper, then transported him to the nearest emergency room. Helping to process the crime scene was Nebraska State Patrol Sergeant Lynn Williams.
We secured the area, and then our major concern was obviously the gathering of evidence. So we collected the trooper's service pistol, his duty and gun belt, spent shell casings that were still at the scene. We took 35 millimeter photographs, videotaped the scene.
Moses had fired several bullets. One struck the cruiser's reflective seal, perhaps the only thing visible in the dark prairie.
The bullet had passed through the door of the trooper's patrol car, had struck the trooper in the abdomen, piercing his bulletproof vest, as well as traveling through his body.
To get through that much protection, the gun Moses used against police had to be a powerful one.
It was obvious that this was a high-powered rifle. We were looking for some sort of an assault rifle, something large bore, high-powered.
The state police brought the spent rifle slugs to their ballistics lab for analysis. Technicians there examined the size, weight, and metal composition of the slugs. They determined they were high-velocity rounds, most likely fired from a 7.62 SKS military assault rifle. Deadly weaponry designed for trained military personnel, something else entirely in the hands of a criminal. After the multiple cop shooting, the FBI joined the effort to capture Moses. Special Agent Ron Raywald took the call at the normally quiet North Platte, Nebraska FBI resident agency.
Our caseload primarily is in the area of white-collar crime, and it's not very common that we get called in to assist in investigations of violent criminal activity.
Agent Raywald gathered information to obtain an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrant against Moses.
In this particular case, we anticipated that Moses would leave the state of Nebraska after he fled his arrest, and that the FBI could assist in locating him.
Hoping to catch Moses before he left Nebraska, authorities set up a command center at a state police barracks. Officers from virtually every law enforcement agency in the state shared intelligence on Moses. Several had had run-ins with him, usually in connection with clandestine meth labs.
He had a history of using abandoned farmsteads, farm places, not only for the manufacture of methamphetamine, but for hiding and living as well. So we knew that we needed to be aware of this and target those areas for a search.
Hundreds of police vehicles across the state mobilized, with officers looking for any sign of Charles Moses or his maroon pickup truck. In the sprawling rural landscape, finding Moses would not be easy.
Moses Jr. was last seen wearing a light-colored winter
Investigators also hoped the public would assist in the search.
1995 4x4 pickup truck with
Media bulletins urged citizens to avoid Moses and to call the police if they spotted him.
information. Call the special tip line.
In the small town of Dickens, Nebraska, 30 miles south of where the two officers were shot, a young farmer found tire tracks leading to a garage. His parents' car was usually inside. Instead, there was a maroon pickup truck. His parents' car was gone. Recognizing the truck from media reports, the farmer called police. The Nebraska State Patrol confirmed that the truck belonged to Charles Moses and that officers had hit the vehicle when returning fire.
The license plate that we were looking for was still displayed on the truck, which was registered to Mr. Moses. It had evidence that it had been shot at with a firearm. The bullet holes were in the back portion of the cab. They had shattered the back window of the cab. Some had lodged in the dash of the cab, and some had passed out through the front windshield.
Make sure you get this wheel on.
Investigators also found evidence the suspect was wounded by at least one of the many shots fired at the vehicle.
We located human blood in the cab, the interior of the pickup. That led us to believe that possibly when the Lincoln County deputy had fired at Moses early on during the incident, that possibly he had been struck.
But if Moses was injured, he had the perfect drug to stay alert, pain-free and aggressive, to keep running without sleep.
There was a tremendous amount of paraphernalia located in his pickup that deals with cooking or the manufacture of methamphetamine. He virtually had a lab present in the back of the truck.
Investigators also found survivalist gear, police radios, and weapons in the truck. What they didn't find was the high-powered assault rifle Moses used to shoot two police officers. An hour after the pickup was found, and 60 miles northwest in Ogallala, Nebraska, the Nebraska State Patrol responded to a call from a man who said he was an acquaintance of Charles Moses.
He was in a car. I was wondering about you. Haven't seen you for a while.
The man said he had seen Moses 15 minutes earlier. Moses spoke to him at a truck stop. He was in a car that matched the description of the vehicle missing from the Dickens farm.
So listen.
While they talked, Moses heard a radio bulletin that said police were looking for the vehicle.
If you see this vehicle, call state
I gotta
police
get out of here,
immediately.
He panicked and took off. The man said he had waited 15 minutes to call police because he was afraid at first. The dangerous fugitive knew where his family lived.
Okay, let's go out to my car.
Police worried Moses would change vehicles again to throw them off his trail. Two hours after the last sighting, and 20 miles south of the truck stop in Paxton, Nebraska, a farmer noticed fresh tire tracks outside a house on his family's farmstead, a house that was closed up and unused. He called his family to ask if anyone had been to the house. They hadn't, but they told him about the bulletins, warning of a dangerous fugitive in the area. They said he should leave the place immediately. A relative on the line heard the farmer talking to someone. The police would soon learn that Charles Moses had just claimed his first murder victim. The deadly fugitive was still on the run, now more desperate than ever. On February 14th, 2000, 36 hours after fugitive Charles Moses seriously wounded 2 Nebraska law enforcement officers, a murder investigation began in Paxton, Nebraska. The victim was a local farmer, killed while talking to a relative on his cell phone. The investigative team had to piece together the murder from crime scene clues. The circumstances indicated Charles Moses was involved, to Nebraska State Police Sergeant Lynn Williams.
We had learned that the victim had drove in the abandoned farmstead to check on tire tracks that he observed. We believed that he surprised Moses, and Moses reacted with that surprise and shot the victim, killing him. Moses then drugged the victim from the victim's pickup, placed him on the ground, and Moses then got back in the victim's pickup and left the scene.
Troopers found tracks consistent with those on the model of truck the farmer drove, as well as broken glass from the truck on one side of the driveway. The position of the glass suggested the vehicle's driver's side window had been blown out. FBI Special Agent Ron Raywalt knew the glass was an important clue.
I anticipated that Moses would try and use a defense of self-defense, stating that he was returning fire from someone shooting at him. I knew that I could determine how many shots were fired and the direction that the shots originated from. When a high-speed projectile hits a piece of glass and the glass breaks, physical characteristics are left in the glass. This answers questions for the crime scene investigator. It tells them which bullet hit first and the direction of travel of the bullet.
The glass would be examined later in the lab. Behind a barn property, investigators found the stolen car that Moses was last seen driving. The car seemed hastily abandoned. In the back seat, troopers found chemicals, knives, and several firearms. It appeared that Moses had switched vehicles after he heard a radio report that police were looking for this car.
It was very obvious that Mr. Moses had been attempting to hide or camouflage, conceal the vehicle. It had a tarp over it, and Moses was in the process of covering the vehicle with broken and dead branches, tree branches, and that sort of stuff.
Investigators found the victim's identification, but they couldn't find the cell phone he was using when he was murdered. They believe Moses had the phone with him in the farmer's blue pickup truck. They issued an APB for the vehicle and contacted cell phone companies to begin tracking the cell phone signal. While powered on, cell phones are constantly in search of the nearest tower to be ready for use. Police can flag a specific phone number and learn which tower is serving it. 2 hours after the farmer's murder was discovered, a cell phone tower in Oshkosh, Nebraska picked up the signal from the missing phone. But before police could respond to the location, the cell phone signal disappeared. The FBI also studied the glass fragments from the farmstead crime scene.
I was able to determine that one bullet had been fired from outside the truck into the truck, and that the bullet thereafter passed through the truck. My examination further disclosed that no shots were fired from inside the truck. This was not self-defense. This was murder.
Take a look at this.
With the farmer's murder and the theft of his pickup truck, the FBI issued another federal warrant against Charles Moses.
The facts of the case had changed significantly, and I was able to change the warrant application process to charge Mr. Moses with the federal carjacking statute with a homicide.
Lock their doors.
With Charles Moses crisscrossing the state, armed and out of control, Nebraska Governor Mike Johans held a news conference to warn the public.
This is a situation that we need to get through.
Police are seeking Charles Moses.
It was clear the fugitive was ready to kill civilians to get what he wanted.
He's considered armed and dangerous.
That evening, 80 miles to the west, near the Nebraska-Wyoming border, an elderly woman was enjoying a quiet evening. She heard someone breaking in through a door. She could hear an intruder walking through the house, then approaching her bedroom. It was too late to escape, so she did her best to hide. The evening news had said Moses killed the last resident he surprised. It sounded like he was looking for something, and then left. The woman was unharmed and called police from a neighbor's house. She explained that she never saw the man's face. But deputies from the Scottsbluff, Nebraska Sheriff's Department found tire tracks consistent with those on the pickup truck stolen from the murdered farmer. They also recovered automotive glass near the left tire track. Its position suggested it came from the driver's side window. The window investigators believe Moses shot out while killing the farmer. Local officers contacted the FBI about the new development.
From the facts of the case and the type of glass left at that crime scene, it was obvious that Moses had been involved in that burglary and that he was traveling in a westerly direction. Moses, and we got his physical description.
With Charles Moses believed to be near Nebraska's western border, the FBI notified Wyoming law agencies that a killer might be headed their way. The small town of Lusk, Wyoming, is 20 miles from the Nebraska border. At the Lusk Police Department, Chief Gary Gill received the FBI bulletin.
That morning, we heard about Charles Moses from our dispatch. We knew that he was driving a Nebraska pickup truck, blue in color, and that he could be headed in any direction.
The Wyoming media warned the public about the fugitive. Around 1 p.m. that afternoon, the media alerts paid off.
We heard about the call from a truck driver who had called into dispatch and was relayed to our office that possibly that pickup truck Charles Moses was driving was at the south end parking lot of the truck stop here in Lusk.
Assistant Chief Dusty Chrisman responded to the scene along with Chief Gill. Several vehicles in the parking lot fit the description. Officers knew one of them might hold a murderer who also tried to kill 2 policemen.
We were looking at license plates. We spotted a blue pickup that had matched the description.
The plates matched. It was the truck.
We decided to try to block him in if we could.
The officers approached from opposite directions. Someone was inside, but the officers couldn't tell if it was Moses. The truck's driver's side window appeared to be missing. If it was Moses, he might have finally come down off a long and haggard methamphetamine binge. Chief Gill called for backup and waited for more units to arrive.
L2, this would be the vehicle I think we're looking for.
Then, the driver woke up.
He's waking up, he's gonna take off.
But Assistant Chief Chrisman couldn't risk firing because from his perspective, he did not get a good enough look to be absolutely sure it was Moses. It meant another chase.
Our biggest fears during the chase is when Moses turned onto Main Street and headed north. We knew he was going to be traveling through our business district and more than likely a high rate of speed. And also the fear of maybe losing him once he got through the city limits and headed north on Highway 85.
Weeks after Charles Moses' violent spree began, law enforcement once again had him in their sights. After eluding Nebraska authorities and the FBI, suspected murderer Charles Moses had crossed into Lusk, Wyoming. Lusk police were in pursuit. But Moses had a lead on him and never hesitated for a moment.
Mr. Moses finally got away from us off Highway 85 onto our ranch road. The road was very rutted up. Our small vehicles with 2-wheel drive could not keep up with him in 4-wheel drive in the pickup he had. He went down to a ranch place and across a old dam and up into the pastures through fences and things where we couldn't chase him.
Authorities lost him again. So Lusk police teamed with the Niobrara County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Samuel Reed helped devise a 10-mile perimeter to contain Moses.
The perimeter was a very large area. We were fortunate in one way. It sat kind of in the middle of 3 major highways, and we had another county road that dissected it basically in the middle.
But they couldn't rush in.
We were unsure what his actions were going to be. So we stayed back a ways knowing that he had a high-powered rifle.
Every law enforcement officer in the area, including fish and game wardens, manned roadblocks to look for Moses and warned travelers to stay away from him. They also met with residents living in the 10-mile perimeter, asking them to stay vigilant and call police at the first sign of any suspicious activity.
I had a very deep concern that if we did not apprehend Moses before it got dark, that we would have a terrible, terrible time finding him. I knew the ranch people that were there. I was very, very concerned for their safety of him entering the house at gunpoint, taking him hostage and shooting them and taking a vehicle and leaving the area.
All right, thanks, sir.
Although Moses was somewhere within the 10-mile perimeter, the terrain made it too dangerous for deputies to go in on foot. Without body armor and tactical training, they would be vulnerable to ambush or a sniper attack.
For officers to go in there would have been extremely difficult. There are a lot of deep draws, pine trees, ravines that he could get down in. It would have been very, very, very difficult to go in there and find him.
Thanks.
Special Agent Ron Raywald helped Wyoming authorities with the FBI's federal resources.
The Wyoming office of the FBI brought in 2 aircraft to assist in the search on the state highways and the rural roads, trying to locate the vehicle Moses was in.
Flying a grid pattern over the area, one of the aircraft spotted the truck Moses was last seen driving. It looked like it was stuck in a ravine. A SWAT team from the Nebraska State Patrol was airlifted to the area. Moses was armed with a high-powered rifle. The SWAT team had to move cautiously, man by man. An aggressive fugitive on powerful drugs could be behind any tree, ready to kill. They positioned themselves above the pickup, but they had no visual of Charles Moses. He might be watching them, waiting for a clean shot. They had to start their search from the truck. To stun and distract anyone near it, they fired a flashbang percussion grenade. He wasn't there. They found footprints in the mud by the truck and began following them. But in the trees, the trail went cold.
He had eluded us, the people that were right on the scene. He had eluded a SWAT team that had been flown in out of Nebraska.
That night, Moses would surface again. At 8:30 p.m., rancher Jim Kramers and his son Justin heard their dog barking at something behind the house. They knew about Moses, so Justin went out armed. Someone was out there.
I've got a gun. Don't go any further.
From the brief look, they believed it was Moses. The gunman had to be stopped.
Justin, take your rifle, go around back, get on the back side of him, and then you do what you have to do. Okay?
Kramers was unarmed, in a standoff with a desperate fugitive who had never hesitated to use violence. The rancher had a plan and hoped it would work. In eastern Wyoming, a rancher and his son found fugitive Charles Moses on their property. From media reports, rancher Jim Kramers knew Moses was wanted for shooting several police officers and killing a farmer for his truck.
Justin, you know, on the backside.
Justin Kramers went to cover Moses from the back. The father risked his life, hoping to end the fugitive's rampage without more violence.
I was totally unarmed. Moses had a rifle and a large caliber pistol in his hands.
Hoping his son could protect him if his plan failed, Jim Kramers offered Moses a deal. He knew the fugitive had been exposed to the day's cold rain showers.
And put it there by that wheel.
If Moses put down the guns and came inside, the rancher would give him a hot meal and throw his clothes in the dryer.
This was a plan in my head that if I got him in the house, I had nothing to fear from him because we would know that he had no weapons. It was too cold, and if he ran out of the house without any of his clothes with him, why, he was not going to be in good shape. I very seldom invite someone into my house that I don't ask them to eat, so I knew he was hungry, so I said, let's have something to eat.
That's the only way we're going
If they got him inside, they would try to call the police without him knowing. By this time, Justin Kramers had Moses in his sights. It looked like Moses was going for it. Then he tensed.
All right, I put my rifle down now. Where's the other guy you're with?
Right behind you.
Jim Kramers hoped Moses would not draw his son into his violence.
My greatest concern throughout the ordeal was that my son would not have to shoot someone. I didn't want him, you know, justly or unjustly, I did not want him to have to go through life knowing that he had killed a person.
If it did turn violent, Justin could not waver.
Justin!
One of the fears I had was if I did have to shoot at him that I might miss. I only had one shot while he had up to 6 in his pistol, where I had a single-shot rifle.
After weeks of a methamphetamine-induced rampage, Charles Moses finally slowed down.
All right, let's go on into the house. We'll get you food.
He left his weapons outside.
I never actually lowered my rifle. I brought it down a small ways, but within quick enough time enough that I could have brought it back up to put on him if I needed to.
Inside the warm house and out of his wet clothes, Moses concentrated on his first hot meal in days.
I was able to go out the front door of the house and was gone for around 5 minutes while I called the sheriff from my brother's house, and then I was able to come back in the same door while he never realized I was gone.
What's going on, Jim?
A Lusk police officer and a Wyoming game warden were there in minutes. Because of the Kramers' plan, the wild, deadly fugitive had nothing to fight with. After a staggering chase across hundreds of miles, filled with burglary, carjacking, gunfights, and murder, Charles Moses Jr. was finally in police custody. As they theorized, Moses had been wounded by Nebraska deputies. At a Cheyenne, Wyoming hospital, Moses was treated for a bullet wound to his shoulder, dehydration, and exhaustion. The drugs he had taken, and the police relentlessly on his trail, had run him into the ground. FBI Special Agent Ron Raywalt arranged for Moses to be transported back to Nebraska.
The morning after the arrest, when I drove to Cheyenne, Wyoming, I took a lieutenant with the Nebraska State Patrol with me, and I took Deputy Casey Nelms with me, the individual that had attempted to initiate the arrest originally. The purpose of taking these two individuals with me was so that when I returned to Nebraska with Moses, both individuals could effect the respective warrants that they were carrying. The lieutenant from the patrol arrested Moses for the violation of shooting a Nebraska State Patrol trooper, and Casey Nelms arrested Moses for the murder of the farmer as well as the assault by shooting of the two deputies from Lincoln County.
Moses initially fought the charges against him. But when confronted with ballistics and other forensic evidence, he plea bargained to avoid the death penalty. Charles Moses Jr. pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and 2 counts of assault on a police officer. He was sentenced to 190 years in prison. The state trooper Moses shot returned to light duty in June of 2000. Moses had also shot Lincoln County Sheriff's Deputy Stan McKnight in the head and hand. He spent nearly 2 months in the hospital. Never willing to give up, McKnight was determined to return to his regular patrol.
I had to go back for several different operations, with a total of 9 operations and 23 months of continuing therapy. After the doctors had stated that they had done all that they could for me, I was checked and we went through all the physical dexterity, and I was able to go back to work and maintain and do what I was doing before.
Methamphetamine has become the biggest drug problem in the Midwest. Law enforcement there are dedicated to fight it, whatever the cost.